My parents secretly gutted my first tech startup when I was 24 years old, ruthlessly handing all my hard-earned clients to my older sister so she could play CEO. 8 years later, when my new cybersecurity empire sold for $950 million and made national news, my mother texted me for the first time in years. Family dinner, this Sunday. No excuses. She thought she was summoning the broke, defeated kid they had walked all over. She didn't realize I had already secretly bought my sister's failing company through a blind trust, and I was coming to dinner to serve the ultimate eviction notice. The very first company I ever built had exactly 14 clients, and it was run out of a claustrophobic, poorly ventilated shared office space situated directly above a commercial bakery on Elm Street. I was 24 years old, exhausted, running on fumes, but incredibly proud. The desk I worked at every single day was literally a solid core wooden door I had salvaged from a hardware store's clearance bin. I laid it completely flat across two heavily dented metal filing cabinets because I absolutely could not afford a real piece of office furniture. The primary server rack, which held everything together, was shoved into a tiny utility closet right next to a massive, ancient water heater that caused the servers to overheat at least twice a month, forcing me to constantly monitor the temperature with a cheap thermometer. My very first official contract was with a local logistics firm named Sterling & Co. They agreed to pay me $900 a month for basic network monitoring, firewall maintenance, and quarterly security audits. I remember the exact day we finalized that contract. I had to fill out their comprehensive intake form completely by hand because my cheap, second-hand inkjet printer had jammed for the third time that morning. My messy, hurried handwriting covered every single available line of that crisp white page. There was a distinct, overlapping coffee ring on the very back of the paper from the ceramic mug I was nervously clutching while waiting for the blue ink to dry. I can still vividly remember the heavy, comforting weight of that cheap mug, and the exact way the paper curled slightly at the edges from the heat of the coffee. That handwritten intake form was physical proof that something real had finally started. Within 8 months of relentless grinding, I had 14 solid clients paying a combined total of $16,000 a month. It certainly wasn't a massive fortune, but it was entirely mine. Every single dollar was earned from grueling cold calls, offering free consultations, and physically showing up at corporate business parks with a heavy laptop and a sales pitch I had nervously rewritten at least 50 times. The office still smelled overwhelmingly like yeast and burnt sugar from the bakery downstairs, and the ceiling tiles had ugly, yellow water stains that seemed to change shape whenever it rained heavily, but the company was undeniably growing. I was building something substantial with my own two hands. Then, my parents decided to get involved. My father, Arthur, sat me down at his expensive mahogany dining table on a quiet Sunday afternoon in late November and bluntly told me that my older sister, Chloe, desperately needed work. She had recently earned an MBA from a mid-tier state university, possessing a resume that looked significantly better on paper than it actually performed in real-world interviews. She had been completely unemployed for 5 agonizing months, and the rejection letters were piling up. He framed his heavy-handed suggestion as a purely practical business move. "She is your older sister, Elias," he said, staring me down. "She has the formal business degree. You have the raw technical skills. Put her in your office. Let her handle the client-facing side of things, the scheduling, the complex invoicing, the daily communication. You just focus on the computer stuff you are good at. She covers what you are not." My mother, Helen, nodded enthusiastically from the kitchen island, wiping down the marble countertops as if this massive life decision had already been thoroughly discussed and finalized between them long before I ever arrived for dinner. I reluctantly asked Chloe if she was actually interested in the demanding work. She smiled confidently and said, "I think I could bring a lot of value to the table." I genuinely thought she meant the daily operational work. I didn't realize she literally meant the client table. Chloe officially started on a Monday morning. She was surprisingly professional for the first 2.5 weeks. She answered the phones promptly, completely reorganized my chaotic filing system, and set up a streamlined shared calendar for all our client calls. However, on the third Friday, I had to leave the bakery office early to run a comprehensive on-site security audit for a massive new prospect. When I finally came back the following Monday morning, the plastic tray of the office printer had a thick stack of slightly warm pages sitting innocently in it. Chloe had printed the entire master client spreadsheet. She had meticulously printed out every single contact name, every complex contract term, every specific billing cycle, every upcoming renewal date, every direct email address, and every private cell phone number. She had printed it all, taken the primary copy home in her leather briefcase, and the copy she had carelessly forgotten in the tray was the duplicate. She didn't even try to hide her tracks. I foolishly told myself she was just being incredibly thorough. I desperately told myself she simply needed all that detailed information to properly do her new job. I was 24, naive, and I still firmly believed that family members who worked in your office were working for you, not intensely studying you to replace you. Exactly 3 weeks later, My father called all 14 of my carefully cultivated clients personally. He used his authoritative name and his pristine 30-year reputation as a highly respected local business owner, and he smoothly told each one of them that Elias's firm was undergoing a massive corporate restructuring. He assured them that Chloe's brand new company, AITA Tech Solutions, would be expertly handling their important accounts going forward to ensure better service. He systematically called them one by one over a Saturday and Sunday while I was completely oblivious, attending a close college friend's wedding 3 hours away. By Monday morning, my office phone had completely stopped ringing. It was an eerie, suffocating silence. By Wednesday afternoon, 4 of my largest clients had sent formal, legally binding termination emails. By the very end of that month, every single one of my 14 clients had officially transferred their lucrative contracts to AITA Tech Solutions. My mother, Helen, personally handled Chloe's bookkeeping from the very first invoice, expertly setting up the expensive accounting software before Chloe's new company even had a properly registered internet domain name. It was a perfectly coordinated family assassination of my livelihood. I furiously confronted my father at the exact same mahogany dining table where he had originally pitched me on bringing Chloe aboard. He stood stubbornly by the kitchen counter, his arms tightly crossed over his chest, and he said it directly to my face without a single ounce of remorse. "You are running a pathetic toy business out of a sweltering closet above a bakery, and you actually think you are a real entrepreneur. Your sister has a master's degree. She has the professional relationships, she has the corporate presentation. You have a perpetually broken printer and 14 clients who couldn't even tell the difference between a router and a modem. Give her the entire list, Elias, she will undoubtedly do far more with it than you ever possibly could." He said it with such chilling conviction, like he was calmly explaining the laws of gravity. Like it was universally obvious. Like a 24-year-old kid who painstakingly built a profitable company from a salvage door desk with absolutely no outside investors and zero family money should be eternally grateful that his older sister was graciously willing to take what he had made. I didn't give him the list. I didn't have to. He had already violently taken it. The explosive confrontation was merely a formality. The theft was completely finished long before I ever walked into that room. My first startup completely collapsed within 3 agonizing months. I simply could not replace 14 paying clients fast enough to cover the commercial rent, and the bakery shop landlord regretfully gave me a strict 30-day eviction notice when I inevitably fell behind on the second month's payment. I spent those final 30 days frantically making desperate cold calls from a fragmented list I had rebuilt entirely from scratch. Sitting alone in a silent office that now felt exactly like a sterile crime scene, I pitched my services to absolute strangers while the phone on my desk, the one that used to happily ring 10 times a day, just sat there, collecting a thick layer of dust. I managed to close 2 small prospects, but neither signed the final paperwork before the hard eviction deadline. I packed my beat-up sedan on a gloomy Saturday morning. The office was already completely empty because most of the expensive networking equipment had been heavily leased and aggressively repossessed. I took my personal laptop, a tangled cardboard box of Ethernet cables, and the few formal clothes I kept in the closet for client meetings. The original Sterling & Co. intake form was completely gone. Chloe had ruthlessly taken it with the rest of the physical client files, and it was currently sitting in a locked cabinet in a shiny new company that proudly carried her name, built entirely on the grueling work I had done. I locked the office door for the last time, left the brass key with the apologetic bakery owner, and drove 4 straight hours to a sprawling, unfamiliar city where I didn't know a single soul. Because staying in a small town where my father's respected name was constantly on the lips of every single client I had lost was not something I could mentally survive. I absolutely should have cut them off right then and there. I logically know that now. But I was 24. Completely broke. And terrifyingly starting over from absolute zero. The blinding anger had not yet settled into cold clarity. It was still just raw, agonizing pain. And pain doesn't give you a strategic plan. It just gives you necessary distance. So I took the distance, and I patiently waited in the dark without even knowing what I was waiting for, until the perfect plan finally arrived entirely on its own. Update 1. I started completely over. I managed to get a grueling contract job at a massive managed services provider, doing mundane network monitoring on the graveyard shift for a pathetic $14 an hour, which was significantly less than some of my former clients had been happily paying me per hour as an independent consultant. I aggressively saved every single penny for 11 grueling months, sleeping on a thin mattress in a tiny studio apartment that featured a metal radiator that loudly clanked every 20 minutes and a single dirty window that directly faced a concrete parking garage. I officially registered a brand new company, Vanguard Cyber, and I immediately began cold calling all over again. I worked from a flimsy plastic folding table with a refurbished laptop and a sales pitch I had rewritten so many countless times that the opening line felt like an involuntary muscle memory. The first year, fighting tooth and nail, I signed 4 solid clients. The second year, I signed 9 more. And I finally hired my very first employee, A brilliant part-time data analyst who worked remotely from his cramped apartment. By year 3, I had an actual professional office space, a dedicated team of 6 engineers, and a massive, multi-year contract with a regional hospital system that literally doubled my annual revenue overnight. By year 5, I had secured high-level government contracts, a massive security operations center located in a sleek glass building with my company's name proudly displayed on the lease, and a fiercely loyal client base that stretched across 15 different states. By year 8, when a massive national cybersecurity conglomerate finally made a formal acquisition offer, I had 110 full-time employees, active operations in 15 states, and an annual recurring revenue that would have taken my arrogant father 4 lifetimes to match. The highly publicized acquisition officially closed for a staggering $950 million. My personal stake, after 8 long years of necessary equity dilution across multiple funding rounds, came out to exactly $50 million in liquid cash. The massive headline ran that very evening on 3 major business news outlets and a prominent cable news segment that plastered my professional company photo right beside the jaw-dropping acquisition price in bold white text on a bright blue banner. By 9:00 p.m. that night, my personal cell phone was completely overflowing with frantic messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. College classmates, former co-workers from the old managed services provider, a software vendor I had used back in year 2, all of them seemingly warm, all of them overwhelmingly genuine. And then, sandwiched perfectly between a heartfelt congratulations text from my very first analyst and a pointless LinkedIn notification I didn't care about, there was a message from my mother: "Helen, family dinner this Sunday." No excuses. Not a single word of congratulations. Not an "I am so incredibly proud of you." Not even a polite question mark or a warm invitation. It was a cold, hard instruction, delivered in the exact same flat, declarative tone she had used when she essentially ordered me to let Chloe into my office 8 years ago. I stared at the glowing screen, reading the text twice, and slowly set the phone face down on my mahogany nightstand. I had not stepped foot inside that house in 8 years. I had not spoken a single word to my father since the explosive dining table confrontation. I had not spoken to my mother since a brief, awkward phone call in year 2 of the difficult rebuild, when she casually asked if I was still upset about that whole business thing. I told her coldly that I wasn't upset, I was gone. She dismissively said, "Oh, you will come around eventually." I said nothing, and the call abruptly ended. I had not spoken to Chloe at all. Not once. They completely ignored me when I was freezing in a studio apartment with a clanking radiator. They completely ignored me when I proudly signed my first client in the new city, or my 10th, or my 50th. They only finally reached out when the glowing number on the television screen had enough commas to justify a mandatory Sunday dinner. That is not a family. That is a collection agency sending an invoice. But I was absolutely going to go to that dinner, because I had something very specific to bring them. I almost didn't answer her text. My thumb hovered heavily over the delete button for a solid 10 seconds. Then I reread it again. No excuses. She didn't write "when you have some free time" or "if you want to catch up." She wrote it exactly like a legal summon. The exact same woman who silently watched my father violently gut my first company and then happily set up the accounting books for the stolen replacement actually had the unmitigated confidence to send me a direct order. That sheer audacity told me everything I needed to know. She still firmly believed the old, weak version of me was fully operational. I need to go back exactly 3 years to explain what happened next, and why I was so prepared for this text. When Vanguard Cyber was entering its highly successful 5th year, I received a highly unexpected phone call from a man named Marcus Thorne. Marcus was 63 years old, owned a small, regional cybersecurity consulting firm, and had been my father's regular Saturday golf partner for over a decade. His company had just officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. He was incredibly bitter, completely broke, and had absolutely nothing left to protect, which essentially made him the most brutally honest person I had spoken to in years. "Your father invested $100,000 in my company, Elias," Marcus said, his voice raspy and defeated. "Cold, hard cash from his personal savings. He did it the exact same month your sister started working at your bakery office. He explicitly told me he would aggressively redirect all your clients to me first, because my firm supposedly had the capacity and yours was, in his exact words, too small and amateur to compete at scale. 4 of your 14 clients came directly through my firm. The remaining 10 he passed to Chloe, simply because I could not physically handle the sudden volume. When my company officially went under last week, your father lost every single cent of that $100,000. He never told your mother. He never told you. And he never called me again after the bankruptcy filing hit the public records. I sat perfectly still in my luxurious corner office, the phone pressed hard against my ear, staring blindly at the sprawling city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling window. I didn't speak for a very long time. Marcus waited patiently on the line. He wasn't calling to offer me an apology or to help me heal. He was calling because his overwhelming bitterness desperately needed a captive audience, and I was literally the only person on earth who would understand exactly what Arthur's secret $100,000 investment had truly cost. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I lost absolutely everything, and your father just walked away like he had never even been involved." Marcus spat. "He pumped $100,000 into my failing company, violently took your clients to try and feed it, and when the whole house of cards collapsed, he just pretended he was never there. I want someone in this world to know exactly what kind of man he really is, and I figured you already had a pretty good idea." I quietly thanked him, cleared my throat, and hung up the phone. I sat alone with that devastating information for 6 full days before I told a single living soul, slowly turning it over in my head like a sharp stone I couldn't set down. My father had not destroyed my company out of a misguided love for Chloe or a genuine belief in her fancy MBA. He had ruthlessly destroyed my life to protect a secret personal financial investment in a direct competitor. Chloe was literally just the overflow. The arrogant speech about the bakery shop and the broken printer was nothing but a calculated performance, meticulously designed to make pure financial self-interest look like tough fatherly wisdom. And in the end, the secret investment returned absolutely nothing. Then, I finally told Vance. Vance was my brilliant chief operating officer at Vanguard Cyber. We originally met 4 years into my rebuild when he was freelancing as a security auditor. I hired him for a simple 3-month contract that quickly turned into a permanent, high-level position because he was simply better at the intricate work than anyone I had ever interviewed before or since. He was 32 years old, impossibly precise, and the only person in my entire professional life who knew the complete, unedited history of the first company. He had asked the right, penetrating questions during his very first week, and I had trusted him enough to answer without editing the painful details. When I told Vance about Marcus Thorne's shocking call, he sat directly across from me in the glass-walled conference room for 2 full minutes without speaking a word. He was intensely reading my face the exact same way he read complex network logs, looking for the hidden pattern behind the raw data points. "So, it was never actually about Chloe," Vance said softly. "It was always about the $100,000. And Chloe was just the cleanup crew. She got the 10 clients Marcus couldn't handle, the leftovers." Vance leaned back in his ergonomic chair. He tapped his expensive silver pen against the glass table exactly once. "Your sister's company, Aegis Tech Solutions. Their annual revenue has been steadily declining for the past 18 months. I've actively seen their client retention numbers in the quarterly industry reports. They are bleeding accounts every single quarter. I already knew Chloe's firm had peaked at roughly $2.5 million a year in revenue around year 4 and had been rapidly sliding downhill ever since. The original clients she had stolen were aging out of their initial contracts, and without the deep technical infrastructure and personal touch I had originally built into the service packages, her product had thinned into something incredibly generic and easily replaceable. She was desperately running on old referrals and her father's fading introductions, and both wells were drying up fast. "You could acquire it," Vance said, his eyes locking onto mine. I didn't respond for a long while. The dangerous idea had been sitting quietly in the back of my head ever since Marcus's call, but I hadn't let it move forward because I wasn't entirely sure whether it was a brilliant business strategy or just pure, unadulterated spite. Vance watched me carefully think it through. "We do it through a blind holding entity," Vance suggested, his voice clinical and precise. "She would absolutely never know the true identity of the buyer. Standard SPV structure, special purpose vehicle. Clean. Perfectly legal. Completely untraceable. Our M&A team handles all the complex paperwork. She signs on the dotted line. She gets paid fair market value for a dying asset, and every single client she took comes right back to the company they were stolen from. She will find out eventually, of course. She will find out exactly when you want her to find out." "That is the point," I said. "And that is exactly what we did." 3 weeks before the massive $950 million headline broke the internet, my elite M&A team meticulously structured the acquisition through a newly formed holding entity registered under a generic name that had absolutely no visible connection to me or Vanguard Cyber. Chloe officially received an offer letter from what appeared to be a mid-market investment group looking to consolidate regional cybersecurity firms. The formal offer was $2.5 million, a very fair market value for a struggling company with rapidly declining revenue and aging, fragile contracts. Chloe's attorney carefully reviewed the terms, her accountant reviewed the terms. Everything was perfectly clean, because at times was times clean. There was absolutely no legal deception in the paperwork. The only thing Chloe didn't know was the name of the man sitting behind the holding entity. And she didn't bother to ask, because the massive check was real. Her company was rapidly sinking, and she desperately needed the financial exit. She eagerly signed the documents on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a plush conference room at her attorney's downtown office. By Wednesday morning, the complex transition paperwork was officially filed with the state. By Thursday afternoon, Every single client that had been stolen from my first company 8 years ago was officially back under a corporate roof with my name on it. The original 14 accounts had sadly shrunk to just 9 over the years as some businesses closed or switched providers. But the 9 that remained were the originals. They were mine long before they were anyone else's. 3 days after the $950 million headline ran, I drove my car to Chloe's office, my office now. The strip mall parking lot was half empty, and the large sign on the glass front door still proudly said Aegis Tech Solutions in dark blue adhesive letters that were starting to peel badly at the sharp edges. I had the master key. The receptionist wasn't in yet. The narrow hallway smelled strongly of cheap commercial carpet cleaner and old, burnt coffee, and the flickering fluorescent light above the tiny kitchenette buzzed at a highly irritating frequency I could physically feel behind my eyes. The remaining staff had been formally notified of the corporate acquisition, but absolutely not of the buyer's true identity. I walked confidently past the empty front desk and down a short, dimly lit hallway to the large back office where Chloe had played boss for 8 years. Her desk was surprisingly clean, except for a small, dying succulent in a white ceramic pot and a framed photo of her and our parents smiling at some lavish event I had obviously not been invited to. Her computer monitor was completely dark. The large filing cabinet stood heavily against the back wall, gray metal, 3 deep drawers, heavily dented on the left side where someone had angrily kicked it or dropped something heavy against it over the years. I slowly opened the 3rd drawer. There was a thick manila folder labeled Original Clients in handwriting that was definitely not mine. Chloe's handwriting. I pulled it out, my heart pounding slightly, and flipped through the worn tabs until I finally found it. The Sterling & Co. intake form. My hurried handwriting on every single line. My name proudly signed at the very bottom. The date, exactly 8 years old. I slowly turned the crisp paper over, and there it was. The overlapping coffee ring, faded to a light, ghostly brown that was barely visible against the off-white paper, but absolutely unmistakable if you knew exactly where to look for it, because you were the one who had nervously set the mug down all those years ago. I held it in my shaking hands for a very long time. There is a very specific, overwhelming feeling that comes from finding something you painstakingly made with your own 2 hands hidden inside a place that was built entirely on taking it from you. It wasn't blinding anger. It wasn't smug satisfaction. It was pure, undeniable recognition. The form knew it didn't belong there. It had been silently waiting in the wrong drawer, in the wrong office, under the wrong company name for 8 long years. I almost left it there. I stood frozen, holding the paper, and seriously thought about just sliding it back into the thick folder, closing the dented drawer, and walking out into the sunlight. Let it stay forever in the dusty archive of a company that no longer belonged to the person who stole it. Then I turned it over one more time and stared at the faded coffee ring, and I vividly remembered the exact morning I filled it out. The cheap blue mug perfectly balanced on the uneven edge of a salvage door desk. The second-hand printer hopelessly jammed and humming loudly, the ancient water heater violently clicking behind the server rack in the sweltering closet. I simply could not leave my own handwriting locked in someone else's cabinet. I immediately called Vance. He drove 40 minutes through heavy traffic to meet me at the strip mall. When he finally arrived, I was sitting silently at Chloe's desk, holding the fragile form. He looked closely at it, read the faded date, read the client name, and firmly put his hand on my shoulder for 3 solid seconds. "We are custom framing that," Vance said quietly. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I carefully put the intake form in a fresh manila folder right alongside the massive acquisition papers, tightly sealed the envelope, and set it gently on the passenger seat of my car. The mandatory family dinner was in exactly 4 days. Update 2. Day 4. The childhood dining room. I had not been inside this familiar house in 8 long years. The rusted porch light was the exact same brass carriage fixture my father had proudly installed when I was in high school. It had just been painted over twice since then. The concrete front steps had been freshly resurfaced. The metal mailbox was brand new. Everything else was exactly the same, including the large mahogany dining table clearly visible through the front bay window, perfectly set for a lavish dinner like a theatrical stage meticulously arranged before the unsuspecting audience arrives. Helen opened the heavy wooden door and immediately saw Vance standing stoically beside me on the porch. Her face physically tightened in the exact way it always does when a room she thought she completely controlled suddenly introduces a variable she didn't plan for. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice tight. "My business partner, Vance. He is staying for dinner," I said flatly. She didn't dare argue, but her sharp eyes moved immediately to the thick manila folder tucked firmly under my arm and stayed there for a half-second longer than was casual. She turned her head and yelled, "Set another place." Arthur was already seated at the table in his usual oversized chair at the head. He stood up when I walked in and extended his hand like we were meeting at a generic corporate networking event, acting like the last 8 years of total silence had just been a minor scheduling issue rather than a devastating consequence of his actions. I shook his hand, because refusing would have prematurely set the wrong tone for the absolute destruction I had planned. Chloe was standing in the kitchen doorway, casually holding a large glass of expensive red wine, And she smiled at me with the specific, nauseating warmth of a person who has completely convinced herself that time magically heals the things she never even bothered to apologize for. Elias, it is so good to see you, Chloe purred. Helen proudly served roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, and green beans, the exact same meal she used to make on Sunday evenings when I was a naive teenager and the family still somewhat functioned like one. Arthur poured the red wine. Vance sat quietly beside me and said absolutely nothing, intensely reading the room the exact same way he read a hostile security environment, silently cataloging the exits and the emotional vulnerabilities of everyone present. The agonizing small talk lasted about 12 excruciating minutes. Helen aggressively asked about the massive acquisition. Arthur asked highly specific questions about the corporate structure, the team's exact size, the expanding client base, and every single question carried the greedy undertone of a man who was meticulously measuring something he desperately wanted a large piece of. Then, Arthur leaned back heavily in his chair, his wine glass held high in his hand, and confidently delivered what he clearly believed was a generous, magnanimous tribute. $950 million. Honestly, not bad for a kid who started out above a smelly bakery, Arthur chuckled warmly. He said it exactly like a toast. Like the bakery shop was just a charming, rustic origin story instead of the office he had violently emptied. Like the broken printer and the salvage door desk were just nostalgic, funny details in a massive success narrative he was now publicly claiming partial authorship of. Chloe proudly lifted her glass. Helen smiled warmly. I did not lift my glass. I slowly set the thick manila folder on the mahogany table right beside my plate and looked directly at Vance. Vance calmly opened the folder. He read the documents without any inflection, without any commentary, the exact way a person reads a devastating legal filing into the public record. 3 weeks ago, Vanguard Cyber officially acquired a firm called Aegis Tech Solutions for exactly $2.5 million through a blind holding entity. Aegis Tech Solutions was founded by Chloe 8 years ago. Its original core client base consisted of 14 accounts previously serviced by Elias's first firm, which completely ceased operations after those clients were forcefully redirected by Arthur. The entire room stopped. Not dramatically, but quietly. The exact way a room stops when someone reads something aloud that can never, ever be taken back. Chloe set her wine glass down way too slowly, like she was desperately buying time with the physical motion. You bought my company? Chloe stammered, her face draining of color. I bought back exactly what was mine, I said, my voice ice cold. Chloe's trembling hand moved to the fragile stem of her wine glass and stayed there, gripping it white-knuckled. I didn't know the buyer was you. The attorneys handled everything, the holding entity, the paperwork. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I replied smoothly. That was the entire point. She opened her mouth to say something else, then quickly closed it. Helen was frantically looking between Chloe and me, her mind desperately processing what Vance had just read, running the timeline in her head. Arthur had not moved a single muscle. His face was still stubbornly holding the exact expression it had worn during the smug toast, but the muscles underneath his skin had gone completely rigid. I reached deep into the folder and carefully set the fragile intake form on the table right beside the heavy acquisition papers. Sterling & Co. My messy handwriting, the faded coffee ring faintly visible through the back of the page. This was sitting in your filing cabinet, Chloe. Third drawer down, inside a folder labeled Original Clients. I filled this out when I was 24 years old, sitting in a sweltering room above a bakery with a jammed printer and a cheap coffee mug balanced on the edge of a desk I literally made from a salvage door. Arthur's eyes darted to the form. He didn't dare pick it up. He looked at it the exact way a person looks at a photograph they completely forgot existed. Dad, I said, my voice slicing through the heavy silence. Why exactly did you redirect my clients to Marcus Thorne before you gave the leftovers to Chloe? Marcus Thorne's name landed in that dining room like a massive boulder dropped into perfectly still water. Arthur's fork, which was halfway to his mouth, stopped dead in midair. He slowly set it down on the porcelain plate, and the sharp clink of metal against ceramic was the loudest sound in the entire house. His left hand dropped completely below the table and stayed there, gripping something I couldn't see. His mouth hung slightly open, his tongue nervously touching his lower lip. He looked exactly like a cornered man desperately trying to remember a lie he had told so long ago he had forgotten it was a lie. Marcus called me 3 years ago, Dad, I continued, leaning forward. Right after his company went totally bankrupt. He told me all about the $100,000 cash you secretly invested in his firm. You purposefully redirected 4 of my biggest clients to him first, because his company was the one you actually had your money tied up in. The other 10 went to Chloe simply because Marcus couldn't handle the massive volume. You didn't destroy my company out of love for Chloe. You destroyed it to protect your own secret investment. And the investment returned absolutely nothing. Arthur didn't look at Helen. He didn't look at Chloe. He just stared blankly at the silver salt shaker in the center of the table as if it was the only neutral object left in the entire room. Helen leaned forward, her face flushed with sudden anger. Her voice shifted instantly into the shrill register she always used when she firmly believed she was the only reasonable person in the room. You couldn't even keep a dozen clients when you were 24 years old. You desperately needed your sister's help, and you dare call it stealing? If those clients actually wanted to stay with you, they would have stayed. Your father helped you. He helped. The only difference is she actually knew how to keep what she was given. Whatever massive empire you have now, you did not build it alone. Nobody builds anything alone, so stop acting like the entire world owes you a standing ovation for doing exactly what Chloe did, just with more money. I looked at her for a very long moment, letting her words hang in the suffocating air. Then I finally spoke, and I didn't raise my voice a single decibel, because the raw numbers were significantly louder than anything I could ever shout. 8 years ago, I had 14 loyal clients. You called every single one of them, Dad. You weaponized your name, your pristine reputation, and you explicitly told them to leave me. You redirected 4 of them to Marcus Thorne's firm where you had $100,000 secretly invested. The rest went to Chloe. Mom, you happily handled the books for the stolen company. Nobody asked me. Nobody told me. I came to the office on a Monday morning and the phone had completely stopped ringing. You didn't just take my clients. You stole my first contract, my intake forms, my own handwriting. You gave them to Chloe, and she locked them in a filing cabinet and left them there to rot for 8 years. I stood up slowly, towering over the table. And when I built something massive from absolute zero, when I started over in a freezing city where I knew absolutely no one, when I worked for 8 relentless years until the new company was worth $950 million, the very first thing Mom texted me wasn't congratulations. It was family dinner. No excuses. You certainly didn't have any excuses when you maliciously gutted my company. I don't need your dinner. Chloe's water glass suddenly tilted in her shaking hand. She desperately tried to catch it, but a thick line of ice water ran rapidly down the side, spilling onto the pristine white tablecloth in a dark streak that quickly spread deep into the expensive fabric. Arthur finally found his voice, desperately trying to regain control of his room. This is just business, Elias. You are making it far too personal. You called it a pathetic toy business, I shot back, my eyes locking onto his. You called me a naive kid with a broken printer. You explicitly told me she would do far more with my clients than I ever could. That was incredibly personal the exact day you said it. Helen opened her mouth to scream a response, but I was absolutely not finished. Mom, you just said nobody builds anything alone. You are actually right about the first company. Dad contributed. He contributed the 14 phone calls that completely killed it. But I built the second one from a plastic folding table in a freezing studio apartment with absolutely no investors, no family support, and 0 phone calls from a father offering to help. That company is now worth $950 million, and your beloved daughter's failing firm is literally just a tiny line item buried inside it. I looked coldly at Arthur, then at Helen, then finally at Chloe. You maliciously gave her 14 established clients, and she managed to build a pathetic $2.5 million company that was actively dying. I started with absolutely 0 and built one worth $950 million. I bought hers 3 weeks ago. Nobody spoke a single word. Vance quietly closed the thick folder. Chloe was staring blankly at the fragile intake form on the table, at the messy handwriting that was not hers, at the physical contract for a client she had been poorly servicing for 8 years without ever having actually earned. Chloe's company is now officially a minor subsidiary of mine, I said, delivering the final blow. Her remaining clients, my clients from 8 years ago, now report directly to my infrastructure team. The $100,000 Dad foolishly lost on Marcus's firm is gone forever. I am absolutely not replacing it. I am not funding a single thing in this toxic house. And the next time you decide you want a mandatory family dinner, remember that the last time I was invited to this table, it was so you could violently hand over my client list. This table has already cost me enough. I carefully picked up the fragile intake form and smoothly slid it back into the manila folder. Vance immediately stood up. I pushed my heavy chair back, and we confidently walked to the front door together without looking back. Helen sat completely motionless, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. Arthur had not moved a single muscle since I dropped Marcus's name. Chloe was just mindlessly staring at the spreading wet streak on the tablecloth where her water had violently spilled, slowly tracing the outer edge of it with her manicured fingernail, exactly like she was desperately trying to find where the damage stopped. We drove back to the city in Vance's car. The dark highway was completely empty, and the bright orange streetlights ran rapidly over the glass windshield in rhythmic stripes. Neither of us spoke a single word for the first 20 minutes. I was deeply thinking about Arthur's face when I said Marcus's name. The exact way the color violently left his strong jaw first, and then his wrinkled forehead. The pathetic way his hand completely disappeared under the heavy table, like he was physically holding himself in place to keep from collapsing. I almost softened the devastating blow when I saw his terrified face at that table. He looked incredibly old in a way I had not noticed before, much smaller in his chair than the arrogant man who had stood stubbornly by the kitchen counter 8 years ago and laughed at my company. But then I quickly thought about the bakery shop, the salvage door desk, and the 14 phone calls he ruthlessly made over a single weekend to erase absolutely everything I had built, just so his secret $100,000 bet wouldn't have any competition. He didn't soften when he picked up the phone. I didn't owe him an ounce of softness when I picked up the folder. Vance finally broke the silence. Sterling & Co. Renewal is due next quarter. 3-year option. I'll send the paperwork. It's already drafted. 11 days after the explosive dinner, Helen finally called me. It was a quiet Wednesday evening. I was sitting late at the office, finishing up a complex transition report for the new acquisition. Her voice was incredibly quiet and highly measured, the exact kind of deliberate, chilling calm a manipulative person practices in the bathroom mirror or in the car with the windows rolled up before dialing the number. She had meticulously prepared this speech. Every single word was perfectly placed. When your beloved grandmother died, you were the one who tightly held my hand at the funeral, Helen said softly. You were only 15 years old, your sister stood in the back, but you held my hand for 2 solid hours. That is exactly who you are, Elias. You are the one who holds on. Please, Elias, hold on to this family. She delivered it perfectly, exactly like a lawyer's closing argument. The dead grandmother, the tragic funeral, the loyal 15-year-old boy. She was desperately asking me to revert to the weak version of myself that sacrificed everything for people who sacrificed absolutely nothing for him. She was asking me to hold on, when holding on was exactly the blind instinct that had cost me my first company. I only held your hand because nobody told me not to, I said coldly. You should have held mine when Dad took my company. I hung up the phone. On day 21, the managing partner at Sterling & Co. finally called Chloe. Her name was Diana, and she had unfortunately been Chloe's primary contact for 8 years. Diana had signed the original transition paperwork when Arthur had forcefully redirected the account, and she had stayed with Aegis Tech through every single renewal cycle without ever questioning the true origin of the relationship. Now, she had serious questions. I just received the new transition paperwork from Vanguard Cyber, the massive company that just acquired your firm, Diana said briskly. Chloe, the founder's name is Elias. Your brother, the exact same Elias whose name is proudly signed on our original intake form from 8 years ago. I have a digital copy of the form in front of me right now. It's his handwriting. Were we actually his clients first? Chloe couldn't possibly deny it. The physical intake form had my exact handwriting on every single line. The original contract heavily predated Aegis Tech Solutions by several months. Diana already knew the devastating answer before she even dialed the phone. She was just calling to make Chloe say it out loud and admit the theft. We are going to happily stay with the new corporate structure, Diana said sharply. But I really needed to hear you say it. Diana hung up. Chloe sat silently with the dead phone pressed hard against her ear for a very long time, listening to the crushing silence in an office that no longer legally carried her name on the door. On day 30, Chloe went to the office for the final, mandatory transition meeting. The large sign on the front door had already been completely changed to a sleek, temporary placard with the Vanguard Cyber corporate logo. Her remaining 8 employees were gathered in the large conference room, being thoroughly briefed by my director of infrastructure, a woman Chloe had never even met, about the new reporting structures and complex system migrations. Nobody bothered to ask Chloe to join the meeting. She was no longer the person anyone in that building reported to. She walked slowly to her old office. The desk was completely cleared. The computer had been fully wiped and re-imaged. The gray filing cabinet stood against the wall with the third drawer slightly open. She could easily see that the original clients folder was completely gone. She sadly took the cheap plastic nameplate from the door, the one that proudly read Chloe, Managing Director, and shoved it into her handbag. It was literally the only thing in that entire building that had ever originally belonged to her, and even that was mounted on a door frame she no longer owned. On day 28, Arthur drove his car to the large grocery store 3 blocks from the house and slowly pulled into a parking spot near the very back of the lot, far away from the bustling entrance. He turned off the engine, but he didn't get out of the car. His cell phone was sitting on the passenger seat. The screen was completely dark. He sat there in the heavy silence, with both hands tightly gripping the steering wheel for a very long time, just watching strangers push metal carts through the automatic doors. And then, he slowly picked up the phone and scrolled down to my name. He held his thumb over the call button for exactly 9 seconds. I know this incredibly specific detail because Helen bitterly mentioned it to Vance during a frantic phone call weeks later that Vance didn't expect and I certainly didn't ask for. Arthur looked at my name on the glowing screen, his thumb hovering, trembling slightly. And then he slowly set the phone face down on the leather seat so the bright screen pointed away from him, exactly as if my name itself was something he could not physically look at for longer than 9 seconds without it forcing an action he was too terrified to follow through on. He started the engine, backed out of the empty space, and drove all the way home without buying a single thing. He never tried to call again. Arthur sits quietly at his large mahogany dining table now. The specific chair where I sat during the confrontation is pushed tightly in against the edge. The chair where Vance sat is pushed in right beside it. Nobody has moved them. The massive table is now set for just 2 people most evenings, and Helen quickly clears the extra place settings before Arthur comes downstairs, simply because the empty settings made him stare at them for way too long. The secret $100,000 is gone forever. Marcus Thorne's company is completely gone. My company is worth $950 million. And Arthur's name is on absolutely nothing. Not a single share certificate, not a prestigious board seat, not an honorary advisory title, not even a tiny footnote in the massive public acquisition filing. Chloe calls them far less often now. She quietly deposited the $2.5 million and hasn't started anything new. The dining room has the exact same physical dimensions it has always had, but rooms always feel significantly larger and colder when half the chairs are completely empty, and the person who used to fill them is never coming back. My new office is located on the 16th floor of a massive glass building with a sprawling lobby that always smells like expensive marble polish and fresh espresso. The framed Sterling & Co. intake form hangs proudly on the wall directly behind my desk. $900 a month. My hurried handwriting on every single line. The faded coffee ring on the back is completely invisible behind the protective UV glass, but I know it is there the exact same way I know the cheap mug was blue, and the ink was still slowly drying, and the sweltering office smelled overwhelmingly like yeast from the bakery downstairs. I do not frame the massive $950 million acquisition document. That document is just sitting in a generic binder on the bottom shelf between boring quarterly reports, filed under the letter A, between 2 plastic tabs next to absolutely nothing important. I framed the $900 contract from the very day I started, because that is the one I filled out completely by hand when absolutely nobody was watching. And that is the one they maliciously stole, and that is the one I finally brought back home. Vance knocks lightly on the heavy glass door. Sterling & Co. Just officially renewed. 3-year contract this time, he says, smiling slightly. I nod. The very first client came back. The first one always matters the most. Am I the asshole for denying my ex the chance to be a father after he abandoned me and our baby, and now insists on re-entering our son's life 16 years later? Original post, January 19, 2025. Throw away so get your this is fake because new account comments out early. I, 32F, had a baby boy when I was 16. Yes, I know how that sounds. No, we weren't careful. Judge me all you want on that front, I've dealt with that for years. Mike, 33 million, was my boyfriend then, and when I found out about my pregnancy, he did a disappearing act with help from his family. Something future college star, something. My parents were always blunt. What happened next was my choice. After a lot of thinking, and deciding abortion just wasn't for me, I respect that right, I'm not here to debate it. It was just not for me. I chose to give up the baby for adoption. My parents knew a super sweet couple that were looking to adopt. We met, and I just knew they were the right people. This turned from a teen mistake to an almost surrogacy. I started homeschooling to finish my education and to have a rest. The adoptive parents were with me for everything and even paid for most of the medical costs. The adoptive mother was a teacher, so she helped me with my schoolwork and to prepare for college. They were present for the birth and I refused to hold the baby. Instead, his actual mother did. And it was just right. I've stayed in the baby's life in a distant position as a special aunt. Well, he's no longer a baby and he knows who I am, but his mom is the same woman that raised him and I continue to be his special aunt. The only change is now he knows who to call if he needs a kidney. His sense of humor is like mine, go figure. We talk maybe once in a blue moon, which in all honesty is the best. He's happy and I don't regret giving him up to have a happy life. For my part, I married 6 years ago. My husband Aaron, 44 million, was divorced in good terms with Bella, 40 million. They have 2 children together. A boy that is 16 and a girl that is 19. Aaron made it clear since we began dating that his kids' approval was important and that Bella was part of his life forever. Not as a spouse but as a friend and mother to his children. I also told Bella and him about my teen pregnancy. Well, to begin with the kids, my stepdaughter and I get along well. She's obviously closer to her mother, but she still does girls' days with me every so often. It's more like friends though. My stepson is incredibly close to me. He calls me his other mom and always asks me to be present for important events. We bonded when his childhood dog passed away, as my cat died about the same time. Bella and I? We're best friends. I know people have complicated relationships with their partner's exes, but we always show respect to each other. I never tried to take her place. I know Aaron and her shared something special long before I was in the picture. That's their history. And I am a stepmom, not a mom. Her place in the kid's life is not up for competition. The reason for this background is that the whole mess with Mike started when I took my stepson to a medical appointment. It wasn't serious, though he did have to use anesthesia. Aaron and Bella both couldn't get the day off. They tried, but their jobs are on call and they cannot easily take time off. So I went on my own to be my stepson's support. I didn't recognize Mike as one of the doctors. His real name, both first and last name, are incredibly common and it has been years. Not to mention my priority was being my stepson's support and everything else was secondary. After my stepson was done, he was a bit out of it as expected. I was setting him up in the car and making sure he was comfortable when Mike came over. He told me he had been thinking about me and Arzan for so long, and he was glad our boy was okay. It really took me a few minutes for my brain to click on what was going on, and he kept on rambling about apologies and how he wasn't ready to be a father. Blah blah blah. Eventually I just sighed and loudly said, "This is not the baby I was pregnant with. I gave him up for adoption after I gave birth. I am a stepmother." My loopy stepson chimed in with, "Other mom." I had to hold back a smirk to be honest. Mike was stunned by that and it gave me time to catch him up on the important details. I gave up the baby. He knows what happened and why I gave him up. I married a man with 2 children. I am happy and don't want him in my life. And no, I won't give him contact information for the adoptive family. He is 16 years too late. That was the end of it and I got into my car to get my stepson home to rest. Since then Mike found me on social media and has been painting this sob story about me denying him a chance to be a father. How I was a poor mother that threw away her child to raise someone else's children. I'm basically the she-devil apparently. Most of our former classmates that saw the post reminded him that he left me. Some of his HS friends even pointed out he laughed about leaving me pregnant. I didn't know that part. A few of his relatives have reached out to bash me about taking Mike's chance to be a father. That it made me a poor Christian. I'm not. I'm Jewish to begin with. A few friends did tell me it was a bitch move to give the baby up without telling Mike. I don't personally think I was in the wrong, but in case I decided to leave the judgment to the internet masses. So, Reddit, AITA? Clearing something out. The adoptive parents and bio child have a phone number to contact Mike's parents if they want. I have no say if they do or not. I just won't give Mike any information on them. Some of OP's comments. Commenter, NTA hi, therapist here. Seems like it was the right decision for everyone involved. Especially Mike, who clearly shouldn't be anywhere near children given his full lack of impulse control and empathy. As a fellow Jewish lady, I recommend laughing at the poor Christian comments. OP, my mom loves them. I'm in a mixed household with dad being Jewish and mom being Catholic. My mom laughs every time I get a new one the hardest. Commenter, I mean, they can be really funny depending on who's saying it. Also, who are these friends calling you a bitch? They don't sound like friends. OP. They are more conservative friends. I say friend loosely. We're in the same groups. Commenter. These people are fucking psycho. Block block block. Your bio kid might decide for himself to try and find his bio dad one day, but it's your job to defend his privacy until then. And make sure his decision is informed. He knows that his bio dad is a complete ass. OP. I told him everything when his parents decided it was time to tell him who I was really. I didn't make Mike into a villain, just said he left after I told him I was pregnant and never reached out. He's been clear that while I am his biological mother and Mike is his biological father, he doesn't see either of us as parents. I am his aunt and Mike is a stranger. Commenter. Anta. TF. Also, I'm not judging you for the age gap, but I'm definitely judging Mike. Tell him if he and his friends don't leave you alone that you'll report him to the medical board. Also, maybe ask your son if he wants Mike's contact info, but warn the parents he's bad news. It's your birthday song choice, not yours. Editor's note. This commenter thought Mike was 33 when OOP was 16. He was 17 and OOP clarified that later. OOP. He's had Mike's info for years. Mainly via Mike's parents. I think he called them once and Mike wasn't around or something. I got the story secondhand so I don't know the details. Funny comment about anesthesia. Apparently I sang opera really badly when my wisdom teeth were removed. My stepson and I had a debate about why our dog should go to school in his place. Commenter. Consult a lawyer about him talking shit about you online. Medical board? OP. In consideration. It hasn't damaged my character per se considering he's being called out publicly, but him approaching the hospital was weird. We're right now way too busy with another surgery on the schedule so legal stuff is on the back burner. And we are going to a different hospital. Commenter. Warn the adoptive parents about the situation. They have a right to know and can protect the child. OOP. Already done. They do live in another state, so that gives them some space. Commenter. One thing? Knowing nothing about how this works, I assume you were able to get Mike's parental rights terminated given that he left. If not, I wonder if it makes sense to give the adoptive family a heads up that he's coming out of the woodwork. Oop. This was a tough situation because he wasn't around and no one in his family willingly gave a DNA sample to establish parenthood. The judge that did the adoption could have demanded it, but she decided for the good of the baby and myself to just terminate both of our rights. And then the baby was adopted. I was basically deemed unfit and the father was not able to be contacted, and the court did try really hard to get him. To another commenter, it wasn't done with his consent. He was MIA. When the adoption process began, we tried to reach out and his family didn't even hold a conversation. The judge involved tried to have the courts contact him and he didn't respond either. Eventually the abandonment time frame was hit and his rights were terminated for abandonment. Mine were willingly terminated since I presented myself as an unfit mother. One more commenter. This was a pain to do? It mainly fell down on abandonment. We had to prove we tried to contact the father, the court had to try to contact the father, and we had to wait for a set time requirement. I just had the right judge that understood I wasn't prepared to be a mother and decided to set things appropriately. Their relationship. Oh, I don't mind it at all. I wanted him to never see me as his mom. I wanted him to love his family. I'm happy beyond the reasons that his life is great because I am not in it beyond a call here and there. He's an amazing young man and it's because he has amazing parents. I do get moments of pain here and there, and then I remember this kid had the best possible life. I wasn't good for him. And he wasn't good for me. It's a sad reality. I don't regret it and I'm glad I was able to bring him for his parents to have him in their lives. Mike was one of the doctors for your stepson's surgery? He wasn't one of our doctors. Just a doctor in the hospital. I spent like 2 hours in the waiting room, so I suspect he recognized me. His name was on a plaque with all the doctors' names and I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. I should have, I was just stressed and not really thinking. Commenter, I'm sorry. I reread this 3 times looking for the part where you said you and your family moved away and changed all your identities. Nope, I don't see that anywhere. So, this college star and his scumbag family knew exactly where you were and how to find you for the last 16 fucking years. And yet you're the monster who denied him a chance to get to know his son and be the dad he was destined to be. Oh, that's just fucking rich. What a bunch of complete asswipes. Don't let him or his douchebag family anywhere near your son or his adoptive parents. Oop. I didn't even go out of state for college. Went to the local university in town. And this isn't a massive city either. Update post, February 5, 2025, 17 days later. This is probably the one and only update I'll be doing. Because to be honest, I got other things to do and I have my main Reddit account for lurking. I'm going to start with the important matter. A lot of people were worried about my biological kid and what he wished for when it came to Mike. Well, I got his permission to post this. He spoke to Mike once a few days after I told him where he could find Mike. I won't share all the details, only the final decision. There won't be any more contact between them. The kid doesn't want a second dad and Mike wasn't willing to be in his life unless he had the position of dad. So he's going no contact with Mike. There was more to it, but it's very personal and I feel it's not my place to share it. The kid and I will continue to have a relationship as aunt and nephew. And he knows whatever he needs medically, I'll always be first in line to give blood, kidney, etc. For those wondering why Mike is so big into contact with the kid, I found out a few details via his friends. Mike can have more kids. He just hasn't had a stable relationship in years. Which I can believe since I finally had enough and decided to accept going to have coffee with him to get some things squared away. My husband came, of course, but he sat at another table to let me deal with it. I asked him to. The conversation was a shit show, to be honest. Mike brought me flowers and chocolate-covered strawberries, my old favorites. He treated it all like some date. I nipped that bud immediately. I introduced my husband and told him we were very much in love and happy, so I don't appreciate any attempts at unwanted romance. Once we sat down, he started by telling me what I knew about him having failed relationships. That he felt no woman could meet his standards for a wife and mother to his children since he already saw me as that. He claims he feels guilty for choosing college over me and our baby. He was well aware of the court dates regarding custody and that I was trying to put the baby up for adoption. When he saw me taking care of my stepson, he thought I had chickened out of giving the baby away. Seeing me be all caring for our baby boy made him think how great it would be if the 3 of us could be a family, and maybe have a bigger family down the road. He had the gall to ask me if I would consider divorcing my husband and try to fight for custody of our son. I have to admit, I laughed in his face. I probably was overly cruel, but I had years of stress, heartache, and judgmental encounters to drop on him. I told him all I saw in him was a coward. A coward that instead of staying to make adult decisions decided to run with help of mommy and daddy. That any love I had for him died the day I had to push out a full human being, and instead of knowing I had support from him, there was a big empty spot where the dad was supposed to be. That I almost ruined my life and had to throw away prom, senior pictures, and even graduation, because I was far too pregnant to party, appear in the yearbook or walk onto stage to get my diploma. He got to party and enjoy life while I had to fight tooth and nail for an inch of respect, yet we both had unprotected sex. The only difference is his dock wasn't big enough to pop a baby out or satisfy a woman to begin with. That was a bit mean, but not sorry. After I calmed down, I simply told him I had a happy life with a man that loves me. Great stepkids are the greatest gift. A best friend who lets me be a stepmom to her children. A nephew who I adore and who, despite our history as biological mother and child, he still loves me as his special aunt rather than hates me. My family is perfect because he's not part of it, and I have no intentions to live in his fantasy. And that I can't wait to get pregnant with my husband's child to add to that perfection. I also told him to leave our biological kid alone. He has made his choice and it is up to him if he ever reaches out for Mike. And also let him know I would be making a formal complaint to his hospital for his harassment. Good thing my husband took screenshots, because by the time we got home, Mike had deleted all the posts. A lot of his former friends did repost screenshots making fun of him. The silver line in all of this is that I have reconnected with my high school classmates, and to be honest, they are great people. Seems Mike is in a handful that stayed in his school hypes mindset. It's been about 3 days and no signs of Mike. My husband did get the biggest ego boost when he overheard me going off on Mike and has been insufferable, in a good way. So, there's mostly good news. Hopefully one of these days we'll get even more good news, since we actually are excited at the idea of having a baby together. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. Regarding him asking you to divorce your husband and fight together for our son, outside of getting physical, there's practically no overreaction to that. OOP. I almost got physical, to be honest, but I had my nails just done. He wasn't worth breaking a nail. Commenter. Very few things are worth breaking a nail, but Han, breaking one to hurt that bastard would have been one of those things. OP. Yeah, but he's not worth the $150 bill. He wasn't even worth the $14 bill at the cafe. OP explains. It was an anniversary gift from my stepdaughter. Normally my nails are like, 40 maybe? XD commenter. Of course he didn't pick up the check. Oh, we left before and I paid my part and my husband's. Don't know if he paid his. Commenter. Did he at least leave those strawberries for your husband to feed to while you recline in bed? OP. Nah, we left them on the table for him with the flour. My husband bought me my current favorite, macadamias covered in chocolate. A new neighbor began watching me, carrying a rifle, and leaving dead fish in my mailbox. Despite reporting him, the harassment escalated. Original post February 4, 2019. A few weeks ago, a new neighbor moved in across the street. To my knowledge, it's one guy who is about 40 to 50 years old. For the past few weeks since he moved in, he has been taking walks around the neighborhood, and every once in a while when he passes my house, my living room has a window that can see into the front yard, he stands and watches me. When I go outside to investigate, he just says something to the tune of admiring my shingle work, or stargazing. He has used these excuses before. He never comes directly onto my property when he does this. A few days ago I came home, and when I went to pull the trash cans back from the street, my neighbor was sitting on his front porch with a rifle in his lap in plain view. I ask him if there is anything wrong and he just nods at me. I went back into my house and called the police. Now the spot I called the police from was in my kitchen. The only way to look into my kitchen from a window is if you walked up to my living room window and peered to the left. After hanging up the phone, I turned towards the living room and saw my neighbor about 2 feet away from my window, peering in with a rifle. I run into my room and locked the door. After the police arrived, I told them what happened, and they told me that since he wasn't pointing a gun at me, that it wasn't a threat. The most they can do is trespass him, but by the time they arrived, he left his house. Yesterday I came home at around 10 p.m. and found a dead fish in my mailbox. Without any evidence, how can I stop my neighbor from harassing me? Can I get a restraining order against him? Relevant comments. Comment 1. Make a police report about the dead fish. Make the police take the report, even if you don't actually know for sure who put it there, you have your suspicions. Tell them. If they refuse to take a report, Calmly escalate the matter to an officer with a higher standing and don't leave until a report is taken. Keep all of the police reports you make. And, as everyone else has suggested, definitely get a good home security system, preferably with several cameras. Comment 2. I don't know shit about the law, but I'd say you should get a camera installed and probably keen any evidence of things put through your door. Then speak to the police lawyer to see what your options are. Up to a deleted comment, I'm fully prepared for any future aggression, but I am looking for a non-violent route first. I don't think I had cause in any of my previous encounters to use force. Since then I got cameras with night vision, motion detection alerts, window tint for my living room and big thick curtains. I also got a few of those stickers for the area of my house that says "Insured by Glock" to deter any intruders. Now the first night I got my cameras, I checked them the morning after to see how they worked. I made sure that there are no blind spots and all of them are fixed with no movement at all. When I checked the cameras the morning before, someone walked up to them wearing all black including a mask and pointed them down. When I left for work that morning, someone spray painted a knife on my mailbox. I filed a report with the postal inspector and called the police. The police said without any video evidence, there wasn't much I could do. That night, I woke up to a loud noise hitting my house every so often. I checked the cameras and couldn't see anything, so I went out and investigated and noticed small holes in my house. Looking around the ground, I see discharge rounds. I called the police again and confirmed that it was 22 shots from far away. I have a concrete home, so that would explain the lack of penetration. The police offer to have a car patrol the neighborhood and sit outside for 3 days and nothing happens. I asked them if I could get a protective order from my neighbor who has a history of being hostile, and they said since I had no direct evidence implicating him, that I can't file it out of nowhere despite previous confrontations. I filed another report with a different officer and got the same spiel. I asked them to take fingerprints of the bullets then, and they chuckled and put the bullets in a bag and left. 3 days ago, I heard shots again and checked the cameras and noticed they were facing my neighbor's house just where I put them, and I saw a silhouette shooting from the middle of my street before stopping and running to the back of my neighbor's house. After that I called the police in my room while watching the cameras. The police come and walk me through the same BS as last time even after I showed them the cameras. They knocked on my neighbor's door and he claimed he heard and saw nothing. After they left I asked him if he was telling the truth and he looked at and smiled. It was very unnerving. I don't know what to do at this point. Top comment. OP. A suggestion for you might be to purchase a trail camera, essentially an outdoor camera that runs on batteries and records to a memory card, and try to place it somewhere non-obvious on the outskirts or edge of your property. A few other thoughts: go to your local county courthouse and actually inquire there to what the requirements are for a restraining and/or no contact order. The police may not be the best persons to ask about if your neighbor qualifies for one. Contact your local chief of police and let them know your property has been vandalized and shot at. Ask if there's anything else that can be done. Final update. April 23, 2019. 3 months later. This similar behavior is something I suffered over the course of 1 to 2 months in Florida. I made posts in LA asking for help and got reasonably good answers. Unfortunately, my neighbor pushed it too far and tried to break into my house in the middle of the night after a series of weird escalating behavior. As a result, I shot him multiple times. I was questioned and interviewed over 7 hours and then released due to Florida's stand your ground laws. Turns out the neighbor was mentally ill and the family is currently trying to sue me for wrongful death. Hope this goes better for Leo P than me. I should have just moved. Am I the asshole for telling my brother he'd never measure up to our late father after he lectured me about drinking and quitting soccer? Original post March 11, 2019. I have 3 older siblings, 2 sisters who are 28, and my older brother Chris, who is 26. I am the youngest child at 16. 3 years ago our dad died of cancer, after a pretty rough battle. Being 11 when my dad got sick, I remember it being a pretty scary time, not always understanding what was happening, but the one thing I always knew was that Chris was there for me. Obviously it was also a very difficult time for Chris, but he really looked out for me during that time. And Chris has continued to be the same, great guy and awesome big brother to this day. So, 3 weekends ago I went to a party, drank too much, and I got drunk for the 3rd time in my life. I called Chris and asked him if he could come get me when I wanted to leave, and my friends, one of which was our designated driver who was sober, wanted to stay. Chris came to pick me up, worried that I was going to get in a car with a drunk driver if he didn't. The next day he lectured me on my drinking problem, and getting into cars with drunk drivers. Things got heated, because I felt like he was assuming a lot. Because I'm a junior in high school and I've only drank 3 times at parties, which I feel is pretty normal, and I wasn't going to get in a car with a drunk driver. My DD was completely sober, so I feel like I was more responsible than he was giving me credit for. But yes, I was drunk enough to think calling him at 10 p.m. out of the blue to pick me up because I was tired was a good idea. And then 2 weeks ago Chris found out I quit the soccer team. He started lecturing me on commitments, and talking about how I need to be doing an extracurricular for college, and I shouldn't just quit because of laziness. And then things got heated, and he started talking about my drinking problem again, and then talking about my room being messy, and then we were really arguing and he was accusing me of being disrespectful, and then I fucked up. I lost it and told Chris he wasn't my dad and I didn't need him lecturing me, and how he thinks he could replace dad, but he'll never be half the man dad was. I was mad and just looking for something mean to say. Chris left my room, and about 30 minutes later came back in and apologized for overstepping. It was clear that he had been crying, but I was still mad and couldn't bring myself to apologize even though I knew that I should and that I didn't mean what I said. Chris left and went back to his place and we didn't talk for 3 days. 3 days later I finally did the right thing and texted him a heartfelt apology for what I had done and said, thanked him for always caring enough to be there for me, and told him I spoke with the coach about rejoining the soccer team. He texted back hours later. Thank you, that means a lot. Since that time we've only spoken sporadically over text, whereas we used to speak all day. I've asked him if he wants to hang out, and he's always busy or he says maybe tomorrow, and then when I text him the next day he doesn't reply until it's too late. Chris has come to every soccer game I've had over the past couple of years, but he's missed the last 2. I have apologized again by text. I would do it in person, but I haven't seen him since our fight, whereas normally I see him a couple times a week. One of our things has been going to see Marvel new releases together. I asked him if he wants to go next weekend and he said his girlfriend surprised him and took him this weekend. So I replied back, okay, maybe we can do something else together? I'd love to hang with you. I miss you. No reply yet. I know what I said was completely fucked up and wrong. Besides being a very mean thing to say, it's not true at all. He's great. I understand why he's upset, and I know it's my fault, but now I don't know how to make things better. Chris was overbearing at times, but I would give anything to go back to that right now. Is there anything more I can do to fix this? TLDR got into a fight with my older brother a couple of weeks ago because I felt like he was trying to parent me. We got into an argument and I told him that he'll never be the man our deceased father was. This hurt my brother's feelings, and things haven't been the same since. Relevant comments: you broke his heart. And I don't say that to make you feel guilty, I say that so you can understand that a text message apology is not remotely enough. You need to go to him, not wait for him to come over, you literally need to go to his place and apologize in person. OOP, you're absolutely right that a text apology is not enough for what I've done. I want to apologize in person because he deserves one. So should I just show up to his place uninvited? Because I've thought about doing that. I asked to come over before and he didn't reply until it was already late, saying he had just got home, but next time I could. Update May 23, 2019, 2 months later. I thought I would provide an update to my first post. Someone advised me to write my brother a letter apologizing, which I did. I apologized for being mean and hurtful, and that I was wrong for doing that. I also got him a separate card and wrote a message thanking him for everything he's done for me. I went to his house with my letter and card when I found out he was home to go talk to him, but unfortunately when I got there he was gone already, so I slid them under the door. When he got back home he found them and read them, and then he called me to arrange to come see me. He came over here and I apologized in person for what I said. He was very straightforward with me and honest about my actions. He explained that the reason he had been avoiding me lately is because he needed some time apart because he was beginning to not like me. He said loved me, but he didn't want to be around me sometimes. That was pretty hard to hear. He said that lately I've just not been very nice. The comment about our dad was by far the worst, but I make other snappy comments. He had tried to brush it off as me being just as a teenager, but had now decided it was best to let me know. Being a teenager is not an excuse to be a constant asshole to everybody at home, is how he put it. He gave a few examples and looking back he was absolutely right. It was pretty upsetting to hear. I know he wasn't saying it to upset me, and I was thankful that he was telling me, or at least I'm thankful now. I promised that I would check my attitude. He said a little more thoughtfulness was all I needed, and that even though sometimes I act like an asshole he knows I'm not one. After we finished talking we hugged. He told me not to forget that he loves me and that I'm great. Since then I've been trying to be more considerate. I really am trying to follow the advice he gave me. It's been a couple months now, and I'm happy to say that it's working. Our mom told me a couple weeks ago that I'm a joy to be around. In the car earlier today my brother told me that it's been really nice spending time with me lately. So that's good news. TLDR apologized to my brother for the terrible thing I said to him. He warned me that I was turning into someone that he didn't want to be around, even though he loved me. I've worked on fixing my attitude over the past 2 months, and today my brother told me it's nice to hang out with me these days. Edit. Wow, I wasn't expecting this to get big. Thanks for the advice, and for the gold. Much appreciated. I stopped babysitting for my Sil due to poor health. She didn't understand and even accused me of stealing money and even sued me for defamation. For the past 2 years, I, Arya, 33F, have been the primary babysitter for my sister-in-law Gui, 37F. Her children, Mia and Noah, were adorable, and despite Gui Ophir's entitled demeanor, I really enjoyed spending time with them. I recall when Mia was a toddler and Noah was a newborn. I would spend hours with them while Gui Ophir did whatever she wanted. I would play games with Mia, assist her with her arts and crafts, and even read books to Noah. It was a lot of fun. Even though I didn't have my own children, I became really devoted to them. However, things began to alter a few months ago. I was diagnosed with a chronic disease, which affected me more than I anticipated. I had to dramatically change my lifestyle. I used to be full of energy, constantly doing something, whether it was running errands or assisting with family matters. But suddenly, my body couldn't keep up with the speed. I was continuously exhausted, and even basic things felt like mountains I had to conquer. The doctor gave me severe advice. I needed to reduce physical and mental stress. At first, I attempted to ignore it, hoping to get through. But it rapidly became evident that this was not something I could just dismiss. Some days, I couldn't even get out of bed without feeling absolutely exhausted. So, regrettably, I informed Gui that I would no longer be able to babysit regularly. I described everything, how my health had changed and how I needed to prioritize self-care. I wasn't seeking compassion, but rather understanding. But instead of providing the assistance I expected, Gui Ophir snapped. I vividly recall her precise words. "What do you even do all day?" It stung. I felt as though I had been slapped. But I tried to remain cool. I wasn't just lounging around all day, I was in constant pain and exhausted, which she couldn't understand. Yet here she was, making it appear that I was simply being lazy. It hurt. She went on to add that babysitting her kids wasn't even difficult, and that I was selfish for not assisting. I attempted to explain again, but reasoning with Gui Ophir is like talking to a brick block. She didn't listen. No matter what I stated, she was convinced I was exaggerating. I couldn't keep responding to her, so I decided to stop and hope she'd let it go. But she didn't. Every few days, she'd message me, wondering when I'd start babysitting again or expressing her desperate need for assistance. I felt like I was being guilted into giving in. At first, I tried to be strong and stick to my decisions. I was really concerned about my health and realized I needed to listen to my body. But after a few weeks, I began to have a creeping sensation of shame. I kept thinking of Mia and Noah. They were really sweet, and I felt like I was leaving them. It made me doubt myself. Was I being selfish? Perhaps I was simply overreacting to my condition. Perhaps I could still help out a little, just not as much as before. But then I'd remember how my body felt after overdoing it. That notion would bring me back to the facts of the situation. It wasn't only about me anymore. It was about my health, well-being, and my ability to care for myself over time. I didn't want to end myself in a worse situation because I felt guilty. In the end, Gui did not respond as I had expected. She never apologized or acknowledged how my health was hurting me. Instead, she sulked for several weeks. I didn't hear anything from her, other than the occasional passive-aggressive remark. It was difficult to deal with, but I knew I needed to keep my distance for my own safety. A month later, my husband and I received an invitation to a family dinner at my in-laws' residence. I honestly had mixed thoughts about going. I hadn't seen Gui Ophir since our last furious argument, and the prospect of her approaching me again made my stomach turn. But it was family, and I didn't want to cause any problems, so I agreed to go. I hoped things would be cordial and that Gui would have had the opportunity to reflect on her actions. Of course, that did not happen. I could feel the tension in the air from the moment we stepped through the door. Gui wasted no time making me the center of attention in the worst way possible. She greeted us with her smug look, which made me feel like she was already planning something. As we sat down at the dinner table, everyone was conversing, catching up, and generally having fun. It appeared to be a usual family dinner, until Gui Ophir decided to speak up. "So, Arya," she murmured. "Are you still too sick to help out with my kids, or is it just an excuse because you're too lazy to get off the couch?" The room went completely silent. I could feel my face burning as I struggled to remain calm. I'm not one to make a spectacle, but the comment hit me right in the gut. I had not informed my family members about my situation. My heart was beating, and I noticed everyone at the table shifting uneasily in their seats. I took a long breath and responded, attempting to keep my voice calm. I've already explained my condition to you, Gui. It's not an excuse. I'm just trying to take care of my health. She did not even flinch. Instead, she smiled and remarked, "Health, huh? Maybe babysitting would do you some good. Get you off your pity train." She chuckled as if she had just told the best joke of the century, while the rest of the table exchanged uneasy glances. Then the rest of the family members began asking me what had happened, and I had to tell them everything. I was outraged, but I didn't want to exacerbate the situation, especially in front of my in-laws. I merely gazed at my plate and clenched my fists beneath the table. I knew I had to maintain my composure, but inside I was furious. I wanted to say so many things, like how she had no idea what I was going through and how her lack of empathy was truly mind-boggling, but I held my tongue. Fortunately, my husband was not having any of this. He rushed in and defended me before I could say anything. "Gui, that's enough," he remarked, his voice stern yet calm. "You can't talk to Arya like that. She's been through a lot, and you need to respect her boundaries." Even with his help, it appeared that the harm had been done. Gui was not one to back down lightly, and it didn't take long before she began making passive-aggressive remarks. "I just don't get it," she told me with a straight face. "It's not like I'm asking you to do anything hard. Babysitting is just watching the kids for a few hours. I don't understand what the big deal is." Everyone else at the table simply stared at their food, hoping that the conversation would cease. But it did not. Gui continued to press. "Maybe if you actually helped out, you wouldn't be so tired all the time." At this moment, I was finished. I was about to snap, but I did not want to cause a scene. So I took a big breath, feigned a smile and said, "Gui, I've already told you that I can't babysit on a regular basis right now. If you don't understand that, perhaps we should just leave it at that." She didn't say anything after that, just looked at me curiously. I attempted to dismiss those ideas and concentrate on the fact that I had stood up for myself. But it was difficult not to feel insignificant in the face of Gui's complete disregard for my sentiments. The rest of the evening was as miserable as you might expect. Gui maintained her distance, but the tension in the air was strong, and I felt unable to relax. Unfortunately, her resentment did not stop there. Oh no, it got much worse. A few days after the family meal, I was sitting at home, trying to relax after another long day, when there came a tap on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened the door, I was surprised to see a police officer standing on my porch. My heart sank into my stomach as I struggled to make sense of what was occurring. I stood there in full shock as the police officer claimed that he was coming to investigate a theft report. Apparently, Gui had filed a lawsuit accusing me of taking money from her home. The words barely registered in my head at first. A theft report? Against me? I was unable to make sense of it. I immediately called Gui to try to acquire some information. My hand shook as I held the phone to my ear, my heart thumping in my chest. The phone rang for a few seconds before she answered. "Gui," he replied. "What is going on? Why are the police at my door? Why would you accuse me of stealing from you?" She wasted no time flinging insults at me. "You think you can just ditch my kids and get away with it?" she said over the phone. "Maybe this will teach you not to mess with me. I'm not going to let you get away with anything." I was shocked. This woman had truly gone to this length to make my life miserable. The claim was ridiculous, and I couldn't believe I was actually having this conversation. But it wasn't about reason or logic for her, it was about vengeance. She appeared to be eager to go to any length to punish me for setting boundaries and asserting my rights. I tried to remain calm, but my rage was boiling over. "Gui," I muttered through clenched teeth, "I didn't steal anything from you. This is insane. Why would you even make something like that up?" But she laughed, as if she relished seeing me upset. "I'm not talking to you about this anymore," she said abruptly, hanging up the phone. I stood there in shock, staring at my phone. How could somebody be so petty and malicious? I had no idea how to digest what had just happened. The police officer was standing there, and Gui had gone as far as accusing me of stealing. Stealing. It was ridiculous, and yet here I was, forced into this nightmare. Fortunately, the police officer recognized that something was not adding up. After a little talk, he had begun to see through her tale. Maybe I was an easy target for her. But I had no motivation, no opportunity, and certainly no experience with anything like this. In fact, I had been home the whole day the money allegedly went missing, and I had a solid alibi. The officer even checked our security camera to verify my whereabouts. It wasn't long until the entire situation imploded. The officer was courteous and professional, apologizing for any difficulty and assured me that everything had been resolved. But the harm had already been done. Gui had attempted to drag me through the mud, and I had to cope with the consequences of her petty behavior. Despite the fact that I was not in trouble, the entire experience left me shaken. Her scheme backfired spectacularly. When Mark found out about the police complaint and what Gui had done, he was furious. I'd never seen him that angry before. He'd always been the calmer, more patient one in their relationship, but this was the final straw. From what I could tell, he hadn't been pleased with her recent behavior, but the theft claim appeared to be the tipping point. It felt like something inside him cracked. He marched up to her and demanded she apologize to me. Of course, Gui refused. She was too proud, headstrong, and, frankly, humiliated to accept her mistake. I only learned about all of this after Mark came to my house to apologize on her behalf. To be honest, I wasn't delighted with their relationship. It seemed strange to be caught in the middle of their turmoil. But at the same time, I felt vindicated. She had tried to ruin my life with her falsehoods, and the consequences were now catching up with her. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that things were finally unraveling for her. The saddest thing for Gui was when news of the police report reached the school where she worked. Gui had been a teacher for years, and I believe she had always assumed her position was secure. However, after the school learned about the fabricated theft claim and the participation of the police, things began to fall apart for her in a dramatic manner. While no legal charges were filed against her, the fact that she had contacted the authorities in such a petty and vindictive manner was enough to ruin her reputation. I couldn't help but feel bad about how much I enjoyed watching her life collapse. I knew it wasn't polite to enjoy someone else's demise, but after everything she'd put me through, it almost felt justified. It was as if the cosmos was finally serving her a dose of her own medication. For so long, she moved around with a sense of entitlement, as if the world revolved around her. And suddenly, everything was falling apart. Of course, none of this was without consequences for me. As much as I wanted to move on and leave this mess behind me, it seemed like every time I took a step forward, I was drawn back into the drama. I began to feel sorry for the folks in our family who were caught in the middle, trying to decide which side to take. A few family members felt sorry for her and suspected that I had exaggerated or misread her intentions. But for the most part, they supported me. Still, there were awkward occasions at family gatherings when I had to act as if nothing was wrong when, in reality, things had gotten exceedingly strained. Gui's life has fallen apart, and it appears that she is blaming everything on me. She lost it during another one of our family confrontations, pointing her finger and yelling that I was to blame for everything that had gone wrong. She exclaimed that if I hadn't been so theatrical during babysitting, none of this would have occurred. It seemed as if everything that had gone wrong in her life was now my fault. But I had already learned to maintain my composure. I did not participate in the yelling match. Instead, I answered calmly, "Gui, I didn't make you mock me at dinner. I didn't force you to file a false police report. You did this to yourself." It felt strangely empowering to speak those words. For once, I was not going to let her twist the story or make me feel like I was wrong. I won't lie. As I watched her spiral, I felt a little sense of justice. Seeing someone so toxic face the repercussions of their actions seemed natural, even if I didn't take joy in her suffering. I'd endured enough of her harshness. I had to tell myself that this wasn't some small victory for me. It was merely the result of her own actions. The fact was, I never wanted to be a part of this drama in the first place. I merely requested some space to concentrate on my health and well-being. But Gui interpreted that request as a personal attack. Everything that followed, her allegations, lies, and attempts to tarnish my reputation, was entirely her doing. I was not the one who escalated things. But I wasn't going to back down. Gui no longer talks to me, and honestly, I'm perfectly okay with that. If she cannot respect my boundaries, we cannot recover our relationship. I've realized that certain individuals are simply not intended to be in your life, no matter how close you were before. I have moved on from the drama and am finally at peace with it. The only thing I regret, if you can call it that, is the impact this entire situation has had on her children. Mia and Noah were completely innocent throughout all of this, and I have always loved them as if they were my own. I remain hoping that kids will grow up to be kinder and more understanding than their mother. I do not want children to inherit her bitterness and venom. However, the situation does not end here. Gui now faces serious consequences for making a fraudulent police report. I honestly didn't expect her to be held accountable, but it appears she is being investigated for making a fraudulent allegation. It appears that she may be required to pay a fine or face some type of penalty. Frankly, it could not have occurred to a more worthy individual. I'm not sure what the legal implications will be for her, but it appears that she'll have to deal with it one way or another. Of course, even as the walls close in on her, she refuses to accept responsibility for her deeds. Gui began calling me in an uncharacteristically out-of-touch manner. She's actually asking me to pay her fine. Yes, you read that correctly. She wants me to pay for the mess she made, as if I owe her anything after everything she's put me through. It's truly comical, and I'm just sitting here shaking my head. At first, I had no idea how to reply. It's not like I want to go back and forth with her. Every time we communicate, I feel like I'm taking a step back in my healing journey. But this was different. This was her attempt to manipulate me one more time. And I was not having it. I've spent the last 2 months focusing on myself and regaining my peace. And this phone call felt like a slap to the face. She had no right to ask for anything after how she treated me. But then she brought her children into it and attempted to make me feel bad. I don't know what to do now. Do you have any suggestions? Update. 1. Hello, folks. I know some of you have asked about my condition, and I'd like to clarify that I don't feel comfortable posting too many specifics about it here. I hope you understand. But I will admit that it causes me to feel physically weary pretty quickly. I'm still getting used to it, and it's been a challenge. I'm learning to pace myself, but it's not always simple to explain, especially given other people's expectations. A couple of you also wondered how I ended up babysitting for Gui, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about it to provide some perspective. Several years ago, I lost my job. To be honest, I had a difficult time. I'd been working in a tough capacity that frequently left me feeling burned out. After losing that job, I was at a crossroads, wondering what to do next. I didn't want to rush into another full-time job that would be equally hectic, so I decided to take some time to figure things out. Around that time, I acquired a part-time remote job that proved to be a true blessing. It's flexible, pays well, and I can work from home, which gives me more control over my schedule. Honestly, it's been a terrific balance that I've been able to maintain. Even though it is only part-time, my husband has an excellent job, which helps. We've been able to maintain a decent financial situation together, so things worked out, even though it wasn't the job route I had planned. Now that I was working from home and had more spare time, I began looking for activities to occupy my days. That's how I ended up babysitting for Gui. You know, Gui and I have always been related, but our relationship has had its ups and downs. She's not the easiest person to get along with, but when I lost my job, I had a lot of free time and figured I could help out with her kids. It began when she had to leave for a trip with her pals and her regular babysitter canceled at the last minute. She asked if I could step in, and I agreed, despite my reservations about the concept. I assumed it would be something transitory, but it eventually became my second job. She kept asking me to babysit, even when she wasn't on a trip. Her children, Mia and Noah, are wonderful, and I actually enjoy spending time with them, so I didn't fear it. But this is when things began to become difficult. What began as a courtesy quickly became something that seemed like an obligation. Gui grew to rely on me more and more, and before long, I was babysitting on a regular basis. I didn't mind at first, but after a while, it felt like I was doing it for her convenience rather than out of a real desire to assist. It wasn't long before I was juggling a part-time job with babysitting, which was okay when I was feeling well. However, when my situation began to worsen, I felt stretched too thin. Looking back, I can't help but wonder whether I should have established boundaries earlier. I guess I wanted to be the kind, helpful family member who could do everything. However, in the end, it left me exhausted. It's acceptable to say no. Even if someone else is vying for your time and attention, it is okay to prioritize your own needs. Update 2. Hello folks, I realize it's been a while, but I finally have some updates. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who contacted out and offered support during the crazy situation with Gui. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm doing fine now. So here's where things are. Gui did wind up paying a fee for filing a fraudulent police report, which surprised me given how swiftly it happened. She was further warned that repeating such behavior could result in more serious repercussions. To be honest, I'm glad she had to face some consequences for the disaster she created. It seemed like justice. However, I am not exactly celebrating it. I believe Gui would prefer to pretend nothing happened and go on, but that isn't how this works, right? The more shocking development, however, involves Gui and Mark. They are now separated. That came as a tremendous shock to the family. I never imagined it would come to this, but things definitely reached a breaking point for them. Mark was enraged when he learned about everything Gui did, especially the phony report. That was the last straw for him, and it wasn't long before they began living apart. They have been working on their relationship, however. According to what I've heard, they're in counseling, and Mark appears to want to attempt to make things better. I'm not sure what will happen to them in the long run, but there's still a chance they can work things out, if both of them are ready to put in the effort. At this point, I've removed myself from their drama. It's difficult to care when you've been wrongfully accused of something you didn't commit. Gui still blames me for all that transpired. She refuses to speak to me, which is actually rather reassuring. I don't think I could take much more of her toxicity. There's just so much a person can take until they have to keep their own peace. And right now, I'm doing everything I can to focus on my health and happiness. But, matter how toxic things were, I felt horrible for her. I understand her actions were the result of her personal problems, but that doesn't excuse what she did to me. I learned the hard way that just because someone is kin does not imply they have your best interests in mind. Even if you strive to help them, some people will manipulate and take advantage of you. And at some point, you must draw a line. The fact that I can no longer see Mia and Noah has made things a little more difficult. I miss those children. They were an important part of my life for a long time, and despite the difficulties with Gui, I actually enjoyed spending time with them. They're both brilliant and sweet children. It's weird not to be a part of their life anymore. I know they miss me, but I'm not sure if I'll see them again. Gui has made it clear that she wants nothing to do with me, and I do not want to overstep my boundaries. Update 3. Hello, everyone. I know it's been almost a month since my last update, but I finally have some new content for you. A lot has happened, and I feel like I've been on a roller coaster recently. Thank you to everyone who has reached out to me. Your warm words and support mean everything to me. So, let us start with Gui and Mark. Believe it or not, they're back together now. Yeah, I was startled too. Given all that had happened, the drama, the accusations, and everything else, I assumed that was the end of their relationship. However, they managed to resolve the situation. It's bittersweet for me. As glad as I am that they are finding a path forward, I still haven't seen Mia or Noah. Honestly, I miss those children. I spent a lot of time with them, and they became an important part of my life. But with everything that happened, I can't seem to find a way back into their life. I know Gui has made it clear that she no longer wants me connected, and I do not want to break any limits. But I can't stop feeling like I'm losing out. I still think about them all the time and hope they are doing well. On a personal note, my illness has deteriorated in recent weeks. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say I've been battling more physically. I was doing okay for a while until I had some flare-ups that brought me down. It's been a challenging few weeks, and there were times when I wondered how much longer I could continue. I was fatigued, and there were days when getting out of bed seemed impossible. I've been seeing my doctor more often and changing my treatment plan. Slowly but surely, I'm feeling better. But, I'm not going to lie, there's an underlying concern that things could turn terrible again at any point. I simply need to take it one day at a time and be gentle to myself. I'm grateful that my hubby has been so supportive throughout this. He's been an incredible rock for me, and I'm not sure what I'd do without him. Anyway, that's where I am right now. I'm grateful for the help I've received, and I hope everyone is doing well. I'll let you know if anything more happens, but for now, I'm simply taking it one day at a time. Thank you again for being there for me. It truly means the world. At Thanksgiving, my sister discovered I had $12 million and my family demanded I give it to her, claiming she deserved it more. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. So I'm Sarah, 38, female, and I need to get this off my chest. Do you know those family dynamics in which one child can do no wrong while the other appears to be invisible? Yes, welcome to my life. Everything was very typical until I was 8. I was an only kid, and while my parents were not particularly warm and fuzzy, they were present, I suppose. Mom would help me with my homework, and Dad would occasionally take me fishing on Lake St. Clair. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we were fine. Then came the night that would change everything. I recall my Aunt Kelly showing up at 2 a.m. and telling me to pack a suitcase because Mom was in the hospital. My sister, Rachel, was on her way, but something was wrong. She wasn't meant to arrive for another 2 months. The following few weeks were a flurry of hospital visits and hush chats. Rachel was really little. She looked like one of my baby dolls, but with all these tubes and cables, I wasn't allowed to touch her or get too close. That was the first time I felt it, an invisible wall forming between me and the rest of my family. When they eventually brought Rachel home, our house turned into a sterilized bubble. Mom had an obsession with germs. I'm talking industrial strength disinfection throughout, hand sanitizer stations in each room, and constant cleaning. The harsh odor of bleach still causes me distress to this day. But here's the bit that really messed me up. Whenever I showed the slightest symptom of illness, I was whisked off to either Grandma Marie's or Aunt Kelly's house. I mean every time. Sneeze once, pack your bags. A mild cough, you're off to see Grandma. At first, I thought it was enjoyable. Grandma Marie would make cookies, and Aunt Kelly had a fantastic collection of Nancy Drew books that I was working my way through. But children are not stupid. After a while, you begin to understand what is actually going on. You are not being sent away on adventures, you are being handled as a threat. As if your entire existence could damage your beloved sister. I tried everything to gain their attention in a healthier manner. Honestly, everything? Got all A's? Mom would scarcely look up from Rachel's most recent doctor's appointment calendar. Won first prize in the scientific fair with a project about renewable energy. Dad just asked if I could store the display board in the garage since Rachel is allergic to cardboard dust. Is this even a thing? The real kicker came when I was 12. For months, I'd been practicing for the school talent show, teaching myself to perform Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. I know it's a little too obvious. Rachel had a 99.1 degree Fahrenheit fever on the night of the show. Guess who did not have anyone in the audience? Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, attended Rachel's 15-minute flute recital, during which she essentially killed hot cross buns. Rachel immediately learned how to use the system. By the age of 7, she had outgrown any real health difficulties, but that didn't stop her from performing. Headache? Must remain home from school. Feeling tired? Someone else, guess who, should perform her tasks. Worried about a test? Mom would literally call the school to have the deadline extended. I began spending more and more time in my room, immersed in books about art history and antiques. It's funny how life works out sometimes. My room became my sanctuary, mostly because Rachel claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener, so it was the only place she wouldn't go. Do you know what is actually wrong? When she pretended to be sick, a part of me felt grateful. At the very least, I'd be taken to Grandma Marie's, where someone would ask about my day or be interested in what I was about. Grandma was the one who sparked my interest in vintage jewelry. She had an incredible collection of costume pieces that she let me organize and catalog. I suppose I should have regarded it as prophetic. The worst thing wasn't even the clear favoritism. It was how they rewrote history to excuse their actions. Rachel just needs more attention because she had such a rough start. Sarah's always been so independent. Sarah understands that her sister has special needs. Number I did not comprehend. I was a child who didn't understand why having a good immune system made me less deserving of love. Looking back, I can see how these years shaped me. The persistent message that I was somehow unsafe or inconvenient to be around doesn't just go away. But hey, at least it taught me to be self-sufficient. When no one checks your homework or cares about your triumphs, you quickly learn to be your own cheerleader. High school, the majority of people either loved or loathed it. Me, I regarded it as a ticket out. While Rachel was establishing her drama empire in middle school, I was laying the groundwork for my own escape. And let me tell you, nothing inspires you to accomplish more than knowing that no one will do it for you. Remember how I said I spent hours sorting Grandma Marie's jewelry collection? That taught me a valuable lesson, the need for systematic organization and attention to detail. In high school, I approached everything with the same perspective. My desk at home resembled something out of an organization magazine. Color-coded notes, meticulously organized study plans, and everything had its place. Rachel teased me about it, calling me Rain Man. Very great, sis. But here's the thing about being invisible, no one is monitoring your failures or successes. So do whatever the heck you want. I joined every club that would not interfere with my part-time employment at Carson's Diner. Thank you to Carol, the owner, for remembering my birthday when my own parents had forgotten. Debate team? Check. Who is the National Honor Society president? Check. Who is the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper? Check. The debate team was when I truly found my voice. There's something quite rewarding about shattering someone's argument while maintaining complete composure. It also taught me how to negotiate, which I didn't realize at the time but would be useful later. I've won states twice. Rachel had major soccer games, therefore my parents were unable to attend both competitions. She was on the C team, did not even play. The game changer the junior year was when things truly became interesting. I took the SAT and received a flawless score. Not like, oh, pretty good, perfect. I mean, perfect. 1600. You know how many people receive that? Less than 1%. I remember staring at the results screen for almost 20 minutes, convinced it was an error. I rushed home to tell my parents. I realized this is stupid. Mom was in the kitchen assisting Rachel with her English homework. The conversation went something like this. My reaction. Mom. Look, I got a perfect SAT score. Mama. That's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Rachel's trying to concentrate. She has a big test tomorrow. Rachel, you're correct. Yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. She said. Rachel, sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner. I still have the hard copy of those SAT results someplace. Never got pinned on the fridge. But Rachel's C+ in English? That infant received primo refrigerator real estate, complete with a "we're so proud of you" magnet. College applications. The college application procedure was interesting. I applied to 15 schools without informing anyone. I wrote all of my own essays, gathered my own recommendations, and handled all of the financial assistance paperwork myself. My guidance advisor, Mr. Chen, was the true MVP. My parents were too busy to help me with the FAFSA, so I stayed late after school. Then acceptances began to arrive. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan, and each one comes with a scholarship offer. I stored them all in a locked box under my bed, knowing what would happen if Rachel discovered them. They'd suddenly shifted their focus entirely to her. But if Sarah goes to Harvard, I'll be all alone. Or some nonsense like that. The day I received my full ride offer from UMich, Rachel joined JV cheerleading. Guess which one was celebrated with a family feast? Hint, I had microwave mac and cheese in my room while they went to Olive Garden. But, you know what? The scholarship was my golden ticket. Tuition, lodging and board are all included, as is a book allowance. I could finally leave that house, where I was either invisible or inconvenient. The day I received my acceptance package, I went to my favorite spot in the local library, a fourth-floor window seat overlooking the park, and grieved for an hour. Not sad tears. There were tears of relief. When I told my parents at supper that I was going to UMich, they were ecstatic. He said, Michigan? But that's so far. What if Rachel needs you? She replied, I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Rachel's cheerleading competitions are very costly. Rachel is crying. Oh my God, finally. Can I have your room? I need space for my TikTok videos. The summer before college I worked double shifts at Carson's Diner to save money. Carol, bless her heart, always gave me additional tips and made sure I got to take home leftover pie at the conclusion of my shifts. She also taught me a vital skill, how to recognize genuine people in a society full of fakes. Baby, she'd tell me, in diners and in life, the ones making the most noise usually have the least to say. Move-in day at Michigan? My folks couldn't attend because, surprise, Rachel had a cheerleading competition. Aunt Kelly drove me instead, helped me set up my dorm room, and gave me a $500 envelope. Your Grandma Marie wanted you to have this, she told me. She's so proud of you. Later, I learned that Grandma had been saving that money from her Social Security checks for months. That first night in my dorm room, I promised myself, I was going to create such a wonderful life that being overlooked would be inconceivable. Not for vengeance. Nothing to prove to my family. But what about the 8-year-old girl who used to get sent to Grandma's house for sneezing? College and the beginning of something new. College went by in a flurry of all-nighters, instant ramen, and heavenly independence. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan. Not that my folks noticed. They were too busy helping Rachel transfer to her third college in 2 years. But this is where the plot takes an unexpected turn. I got an entry-level job at Everett and Phillips Auction House in Detroit. I won't use the real name for obvious reasons, but if you're in the business, you probably know who I'm talking about. A genuine high-end establishment, many old money clients, that type of transaction. I began with their estate sales business, which involved documenting the belongings of wealthy individuals after their deaths. Not exactly glamorous, but it paid the bills. The breakthrough. My first several months were very standard, logging countless china sets, categorizing vintage furniture, and so on. Next followed the Kingston estate. Mrs. Kingston was an elderly widow who had died with no children, leaving behind what everyone assumed was a huge collection of costume jewelry. Rooms filled with the material? This is where those hours at Grandma Marie's came in useful. I'm looking through this stack of jewelry when something catches my attention. It's an Art Deco brooch. Nothing really showy, yet something about it felt different. The weight was unsuitable for costume jewelry. The clasping mechanism was far too complex for a copycat. I believe I spent my whole lunch break that day researching old jewelry markers and signatures. I ended up staying late at the office to use the company's membership to several antique jewelry databases. The more I looked, the more certain I got that this was not costume jewelry. It was the real stuff. Problem was, I was the new girl. Nobody would believe me if I claimed we had a potential treasure on our hands. So I did what the debate team taught me. I meticulously prepared my argument. I spent 2 weeks during lunch breaks and evenings learning everything I could about Art Deco jewelry authentication. I even used some of my pitiful excuse for savings to pay for an online gemology course. Finally mustered the guts to approach my boss, Mr. Harrison. I brought the entire presentation, which included comparative images, historical documentation, and the works. The conversation went something like this. My response: "Sir, I think we might have something significant in the Kingston collection." Harrison, scarcely looking up from his phone, says, "Sarah, we've already cataloged those as costume pieces." "You are correct. I know, but look at these maker's marks. They match perfectly with Cartier's 1925 signatures." Harrison, finally paying attention: "Where did you learn all of this?" My reply was, I did some research." Long story short, the costume brooch sold for $47,000 at auction. It turns out that it was part of a limited collection created for some European set in the 1920s. But here's the real kicker. Harrison started to trust me after that. He began giving me other artifacts to authenticate. Suddenly, my pointless pastime of sorting antique jewels acquired real significance. I devoted myself to learning everything I could about vintage jewelry. I took every online course I could afford. I spent weekends at estate sales, researching items. Even began a small notepad to document various authentication procedures. My apartment looked like a jewelry scholar's fever dream, with walls covered with printouts of vintage hallmarks and certification guidelines. The auction house started getting results. I was discovering important items that others had overlooked, developing contacts with collectors, and knowing the market. My commission checks became larger. For the first time in my life, I was not simply surviving, I was also saving money. Family? Still remarkably uninterested. At Sunday dinners, which I still went to like a fool, the discourse went like this. "Mom, Sarah's still at that antique shop, right? This is me. Auction house, and yes. Actually, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece." Rachel interrupts. "Oh my God, speaking of jewelry. You guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall." But I didn't care anymore. For once in my life, I had discovered something wholly mine. Something I was actually excellent at. Something unrelated to being Rachel's sister or family disappointment. The Rothschild collection. Then came the Rothschild collection. This was about 2 years into my employment at the auction business. A massive estate. Old money family. There's a lot of buzz in the industry. I was part of the team that cataloged their jewelry collection. And that's when I noticed it. A fairly commonplace Art Nouveau piece that everyone else had missed. I spent 3 days investigating it. I barely slept. It turned out to be a piece from a famous French jeweler's private collection, which was supposed to have been lost during World War II. When it sold at auction for $238,000, Harrison summoned me to his office. I believed I was being promoted. Instead, he said something that completely changed the situation. "Sarah, you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business." Initially, I shrugged it off. Me? Start a business? With what money? However, the notion took root. I began doing modest freelance authentication projects on the side. Word spread that I had a terrific site. Private collectors began contacting us directly. One night, I was sitting in my modest apartment, surrounded by jewelry manuals and authentication tools that I had gradually accumulated, when I had an epiphany. This is something I could actually do. I could create anything on my own. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I took out a large debt against my car. I emptied my savings account. I rented a small office space in a less desirable area of town. People believed I was insane. Perhaps I was. I transformed a storage room above a Chinese restaurant that was about the size of a college dorm room. The rent was low because it always smelled like Kung Pao chicken, and the Wi-Fi only functioned if you sat in the corner by the window. But it was mine. The struggle. The first few months were interesting, and by interesting, I mean scary. I'd awaken at 4 a.m. with cold sweats, calculating how many months till my savings ran out. Loan payments felt like a rope around my neck. My office furnishings comprised of, I purchased a card table from Goodwill. A chair I literally found on the curb. Don't worry, it was thoroughly cleaned. However, in the world of high-end jewelry, reputation and contacts are everything. And my experience at the auction house provided me with both. I started small by doing authentication work for local antique dealers. My fees were lower than the larger organizations, but my attention to detail was becoming known. Word spread. 6 months later, a watershed moment occurred. A dealer I had dealt with at the auction house inquired about a collection of Victorian-era brooches. The owner requested confirmation before selling. It turned out to be a massive collection, with pieces from 3 generations of families. I worked on it for 2 weeks straight, rarely sleeping and documenting everything. I discovered 2 extremely rare pieces that had been misinterpreted as later replicas. The owner was so delighted with my detailed analysis that she not only paid my fee, but also offered me a 10% commission when the piece sold. Was that a commission? $86,000. More money than I had earned in the preceding 2 years combined. Suddenly, my phone rang. A lot. Private collectors have heard about my knack for finding missed pieces. Estate lawyers seeking advice on inherited jewelry. Even my previous auction house began sending me authentication work. I'm quite sure Harrison was secretly helping spread the news. Thanks, boss. Scaling up. By year 2, I'd hired my first employee, Jenny, a fresh gemology graduate who reminded me much too much of myself at that age. She was extremely intelligent, yet she was neglected since she was quiet. She is now my head of authentication and is well worth her weight in gold. The firm expanded quicker than I could have predicted. Moved to a proper office downtown, goodbye, Kung Pao chicken odor. Created a team of specialists. I've earned a reputation for finding misplaced items. You wouldn't believe how many important historical jewelry items get misinterpreted as costume jewelry in people's attics. Keeping it secret from my family. However, success came with its own set of obstacles. The bigger we became, the harder it became to keep it a secret from my family. They still thought I worked in an antique shop. Rachel would make these sarcastic remarks during family dinners. Rachel asks, "Sarah, I have some old jewelry I was going to donate to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would want it?" Me, having just authenticated a $1.2 million Fabergé item that morning. "Sure, I'll look into it." Mom continues to introduce me to everyone as my other daughter. She works with old jewelry or something. Meanwhile, I was quoted in Forbes, luckily under my company name, and we had recently built our 3rd office. What's strange about it? Keeping the secret became almost enjoyable, like this private joke with myself. I'd sit at Sunday dinner in my Target discount outfit, really Chanel, listening to Rachel speak about her entry-level marketing job, knowing I'd just closed a deal for more than her annual income. I even started playing tiny games with myself, such as wearing authentic Harry Winston pieces to family gatherings and seeing whether anyone noticed. They never did. Rachel once spent 20 minutes showing off her expensive $200 Michael Kors watch. I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe that cost more than her automobile. Managing growth. However, the real challenge was managing growth. By year 5, we'd established offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I spent more time on airplanes than in my own bed. We built a reputation for discretion. It turns out that many wealthy people want their jewels verified without the rest of the world knowing. The money was enormous. For example, we needed to hire a large team of financial advisors. Nonetheless, I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. I purchased a nice, but not flashy house in a desirable neighborhood. I drove a high-end, but not obvious car. The only place I truly splurged? My home office. Advanced authentication equipment. The most effective security system money can buy. A custom-built vault to make Fort Knox envy. What's with the irony? They believed I was being frugal by aiding them. Mom would remark things like, "It's so sweet of Sarah to help out. She must be eating nothing but ramen to manage it." Meanwhile, I had just validated a collection, which earned me a commission greater than their mortgage. You know what's strange about success? The more you have, the more difficult it is to explain to others who have always perceived you as inferior. It's like explaining color to someone who has only seen black and white. They lack the necessary context. By this stage, my company was doing really well. We had the Midwest's high-end jewelry authentication industry cornered, and our reputation was solid gold, pun intended. But every Sunday, I'd travel to my parents' house for dinner, playing Sarah, the modest antique shop worker. The cognitive dissonance was becoming ludicrous. I'd spend my mornings on conference calls with Dubai collectors, my afternoons authenticating million-dollar pieces, and my evenings at my parents' house in carefully chosen normal clothes, eating Mom's overcooked pot roast while Rachel dominated the conversation with stories about her latest marketing triumph. Usually something like bringing her boss's coffee without spilling it. A defining moment. One Sunday is very memorable in my mind. I had just completed a huge transaction, Authenticating a missing Cartier piece that had been resting in someone's safe deposit box for 40 years. Was it just the commission? 7 figures. I drove directly from the meeting to my parents' place, still euphoric from the successful authentication. She said, "Sarah, honey, is everything okay? Your clothes are looking a bit worn." "Oh, trying to save money," I said, wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater that I had purposefully chosen for its subtle appearance. Rachel responded, "Well, if you'd gotten a real job instead of playing with old jewelry." "Your dad." "Rachel, be nice, not everyone can be as successful as you." I almost choked on my pot roast, trying not to laugh. The anonymous transfers monthly payments to my parents began about this time. Aunt Kelly informed me that they were struggling to pay Rachel's educational loans and medical bills. Mom casually stated that they might have to sell the house. I couldn't let that happen. Despite everything, it was still the home I grew up in. So I initiated an anonymous monthly transfer of $5,000 to their account. When asked, I said I was giving $1,000 by living on rice and beans. They imagined the rest came from Aunt Kelly or another family. Rachel, of course, claimed responsibility for inspiring family members to help. Watching Rachel spend my money. The money was helpful, but it also had unexpected consequences. My parents began treating me with a strange combination of sorrow and patronizing pride. As if I were some kind of noble poverty case, sacrificing everything to support the family. Meanwhile, Rachel's spending became more extravagant. She'd arrive for dinner with new expensive bags, claiming they were outlet finds. They weren't. I can recognize a genuine Gucci at 20 paces. She began taking extravagant vacations and bragging on Instagram about her fortunate life. I'm very convinced she used my support money for shopping sprees. However, I remained silent. The irony was simply wonderful. The MBA drama. Then came the college fund drama. Rachel revealed that she wants to return to school for her MBA. Another private university, of course. Only the best for the golden child. Mom contacted me in tears, explaining how they couldn't afford it. I say, maybe Rachel could look at state schools? They have good programs too. My mother. Oh honey, you don't understand? Your sister needs to maintain certain standards. But, speaking of assisting, may I increase my monthly contribution for a few years? I increased it to $7,000 per month. My accounts were unaffected. But witnessing them compliment Rachel for taking initiative with her education, while presuming I was living on ramen to help out, that stung a little. The actual kicker? I was giving a guest seminar at the same business school Rachel wanted to attend. My family didn't know that. The dean personally invited me to give a lecture on luxury goods authenticity and business growth. I had to come up with an excuse as to why I couldn't attend Sunday dinner that week. My own achievement started to feel like a distinct life. As if I were some kind of corporate superhero with a hidden identity. By day, I was running a multi-million-dollar authentication business. By night, well, on Sunday evenings, I was just Sarah, the disappointed daughter who worked at an antique shop. The breaking point, Thanksgiving. The weight of the untruth was becoming heavier. Rachel made rude remarks about my career on multiple occasions. Each time Mom apologized to her friends for my modest lifestyle. Every time Dad suggested I get a real job. I believe I always knew it would end dramatically. I just didn't expect it to implode so spectacularly on Thanksgiving. It began 2 weeks before the holiday. Mom called, weeping about her back discomfort. She had been diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the notion of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 20 guests overwhelmed her. Now, I'd like to tell you that I offered to help purely out of goodwill. But really? I became tired of pretending her dried turkey was appetizing. My response, why don't I handle the food this year? I can have it catered. She replied, oh honey, we can't afford a caterer. My response, don't worry about the cost. I've been saving up. Mom, concerned. You're not taking out a loan, are you? I coordinated everything with a high-end catering firm that I use for business gatherings. They do incredible work, the kind of food that makes you wonder why you ever bothered to prepare yourself. It cost more than my folks thought I earned in 2 months, but whatever. Thanksgiving morning dawned, and I was feeling quite good. I had my laptop with me because I needed to monitor a major online auction in Hong Kong. This magnificent Art Nouveau necklace was for sale, and I had a customer who was interested in authentication if they won the bid. The lunch arrived on schedule, and everything was properly prepared. Rachel, of course, had to respond. Rachel inquired. Store-bought stuffing? Really, Sarah, Mom's is so much better. This is from the girl who once set off the smoke alarm while making toast. Mom was apologizing to everyone for not cooking herself, but you could tell they were enjoying the meal. Rachel shut up after tasting the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per plate than her weekly grocery budget. I stepped away from supper and dessert to check my laptop. The auction was getting intriguing, and I needed to be prepared in case my client won. I set up in my old bedroom, which Mom had kept the same since high school. In the meantime, Rachel's room had undergone 3 renovations. That's when everything went wrong. I had left my authentication program running, with many tabs open that displayed various accounts and current agreements. Rachel came in without knocking, some things never change, to borrow my phone charger. She saw my laptop screen and realized this was her chance to finally expose how pathetic her older sister was. Rachel, smirking. Let's show everyone what Sarah's really been up to. Before I could stop her, she took my laptop and walked into the dining room. The big reveal: picture this: 20 people, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and my parents, filled with gourmet turkey and half drunk on pricey wine, which they mistook for Trader Joe's. Rachel's reaction. Time to see what kind of important work Sarah's doing on Thanksgiving. She flipped the laptop around triumphantly, apparently intending to disgrace me with whatever minor antique transactions she assumed I was working on. The room went completely silent. You could hear the fancy clock I got Mom for Christmas ticking silently. She believed it was a reproduction. My screen displayed, current account balance, $12.4 million, pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1.2 million, Hong Kong auction, company's quarterly profit report, $4.2 million. Rachel's face shifted through 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. The final one landed somewhere between astonishment and nausea. She actually swayed slightly on her feet. Rachel whispers, "This cannot be right." She said. "Rachel, honey, what is it?" Rachel, voice cracking. She's rich. Sarah's rich." Chaos ensues. If it was possible, the hush deepened even farther. Then Mom began giggling, really laughing. She said, "Don't be silly. Sarah works at that little antique shop." I rose up carefully, straightening out my basic cashmere sweater, which cost more than their monthly mortgage. Me? Yes. Actually, Mom, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. For years. Those antique shop comments? I authenticate pieces worth millions. That little business you never asked about? It has offices in 3 cities. Dad choked on the liquor. Aunt Kelly dropped her fork. Uncle Mike began coughing terribly. Then Mom's laughing transformed into something else. Her face turned red, then purple. She stood up so quickly that her chair tumbled over. Mom screams, "You have millions, and you let us struggle?" My response. "Struggle? I send you $7,000 every month." She replied. "While sitting on millions? Your sister has student loans." So there it was. Instead, congratulations. Not, "Wow, we're so proud." Just outraged that I hadn't given them more money. Rachel began to cry. Surprising, I know. Sobbing about how she deserved to know, and how I had betrayed the family. Dad joined in. My dad. "How could you be so selfish? We're your parents. We raised you." That was when I lost it. Years of being disregarded. Years of dismissal. Years of being considered as a family disappointment. Everything poured forth. My response. Raised me? You shipped me off to grandma's every time I sneezed. You missed every achievement, every award, every milestone, because Rachel might feel left out. You never saved a penny for my college but took out loans for her private school. And now, you're mad that I built something for myself. The following 5 minutes were chaotic. Mom screamed about family obligations. Dad is yelling about ungrateful children. Rachel alternated between sobbing and demanding to know just how much money I had. Meanwhile, the fancy catering team attempted to serve dessert while seeming exceedingly uncomfortable. I grabbed my laptop, took my Hermes bag, which Mom had previously commended as a nice replica, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Mom discussing how to spend my money, something about Rachel's MBA and a new car. As I went home in my sensible automobile, a limited edition BMW, my phone started filling up with texts. The family group chat burst. Rachel began posting on Facebook about hidden family wealth and selfish siblings. The aftermath. The days after Thanksgiving were like watching a cyclone hit in slow motion. Except that the hurricane represented my family and the debris symbolized my sanity. Let's start with SMS messaging. Within 1 hour of leaving supper, my phone had 47 missed calls. More than 200 messages. Mom followed this intriguing progression. 7:42 p.m. How dare you walk out on family? 8:15 p.m. We need to talk about this like adults. 9:03 p.m. Your sister deserves a share of your success. 10:30 p.m. I've already called a realtor about houses in better neighborhoods. 11:45 p.m. Why aren't you answering? This is your mother. Meanwhile, Rachel had become a full-fledged social media fighter. Rachel, on the other hand, had fully embraced social networking. She wrote an enormous rant on Facebook about how her millionaire sister had been hoarding wealth while watching her beloved family struggle. The comments section was insane. Distant cousins and former high school classmates, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly formed strong ideas about my moral character. But this is the bit that really grabbed me. Rachel actually posted, all those years of me trying to help Sarah's career, giving her advice about moving up from that little antique shop, and she was secretly wealthy. The betrayal hurt so much I nearly threw my phone across the room. What was the only career advice she ever gave me? I suggest I try selling jewelry on Etsy. If you're unfamiliar with the term, flying monkeys occur when toxic family members send others to guilt trip you. Aunt Susan, whom I saw maybe once every 3 years, called to inform me that family is everything. Uncle Bob, who I'm pretty sure still believes I'm 12, emailed me a lengthy lecture on the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister, how did she acquire my number, felt compelled to express her thoughts on family obligation. But the real fun began when they arrived at my workplace. I arrived in on Monday morning to find Mom, Dad, and Rachel sitting in our reception area. They informed Jenny, my receptionist, that they had an appointment for authenticating services. Rachel clutched her Michael Kors bag as if it was genuinely worth something. The conversation went about as well as one would expect. Your mother. We've discussed it as a family. I said. A family discussion, without the family member you're discussing. Mom, ignoring me. And we think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone. Rachel responds. I need at least $2 million to start my new life properly. Dad said. And your mother and I would like to retire. We're thinking a beach house in Florida. This is me. Did you miss the part where I've been sending you $7,000 monthly? Rachel responds. That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us. You're thinking, I owe you? For what, exactly? The years of being ignored? The missed graduations? The constant comparisons? Mama. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. We gave you everything. My response. No. I gave myself everything, and you know what? I'm done. Right there in my own office lobby, I took out my phone and canceled the monthly transfers to their account. Mom gasped as if I'd slapped her. Rachel began her phony crying performance, but quickly stopped when she saw it wasn't working. Then things became ugly. They refused to leave. I had to contact security. Seeing my 60-year-old mother being dragged out while yelling about ungrateful children was bizarre. Jenny asked whether I wanted to press charges. I said no. However, I did have their names placed on the building's do not admit list. The harassment lasted for weeks. New telephone numbers. Fake email addresses. Even tried to contact me through my company's customer service. I finally had to issue a formal legal notice, threatening harassment charges. Mom then played her final card. She called Grandma Marie, but here's the thing about Grandma Marie, she is wiser than all of them together. How did she respond? Good for Sarah. About time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms. Mom did not speak with her for 2 months after that. It has been 6 months since Thanksgiving. I relocated to a new home, with better security. I changed all of my numbers. What about the company? We are doing better than ever. It turns out that my family problems attracted several high-profile clients who respected my caution in the circumstance. Rachel continues to write passive-aggressive updates about toxic wealth and family betrayal. According to what I've heard, she is beginning her own jewelry authentication firm. Good luck on that. Mom and Dad finally stopped trying to contact me when my lawyer wrote them an official letter outlining how the harassment charges would affect their lives. They're now informing everyone that they never wanted my money anyway, and that they're praying for my salvation. What's the best part? For the first time in my life, I feel liberated. No more Sunday dinners full of sly insults. No more downplaying my accomplishments to spare their feelings. No longer financing for the Rachel show. My therapist believes I am finally establishing healthy limits. I say, I am finally living authentically. So, that is my story. Reddit? Thanks for allowing me to share it. Special thanks to the catering firm, who sent me a Christmas letter stating that the Thanksgiving meal was the highlight of their year. Edit, responses to common questions. Yes, I am still in treatment. No, I do not regret cutting them off. Yes, Grandma Marie is doing well. She's coming to visit next month to help me catalog a new collection. One last thing. To Rachel. I know you're probably reading this. What about the Cartier bracelet you're wearing in your most recent Instagram post? Definitely a fake. Just saying. My parents kicked me out on Thanksgiving for not paying for a vacation. A month later, they asked for help after my brother lost $25,000 gambling. This is our thanks for your little support, they stated. I told them I stopped paying the bills and fled, but they laughed. A month later, Thanksgiving was meant to be about family and giving thanks. Instead, my father looked me dead in the eye in the middle of supper and told me, "You have to leave." I froze, fork halfway into my mouth. What? My mother avoided my gaze. My younger brother and sister kept their heads down, pushing food around on their plates as if they were trying to disappear. My father, on the other hand, appeared serene, as if he'd already made up his decision. "This is our gratitude for your small assistance," he remarked, shaking his head. I gave out a quick laugh, believing it was some sort of strange joke. "What the hell are you talking about?" My father reclined back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're not pulling your weight, Jack. You've been here for months, and we don't see much help from you." I stared at him. Am I not doing my fair share? I had been living with them for a few months, but I wasn't just sleeping on their couch. I held a full-time job. I bought groceries not only for myself, but for everyone. I paid for takeaway when they didn't want to cook. I also paid my younger siblings' internet bills because they required them for school. And it doesn't include the times I provided my father with petrol money or auto maintenance when he grumbled about being short. I wasn't anticipating a prize, but being told I wasn't contributing at all? This was ridiculous. I scoffed. "Are you serious? I've paid for stuff." "Not enough," my father interrupted. "You're a grown man. You should take care of yourself." And that's when it struck me. It wasn't just about me staying at their house. This was about the talk we had a few days before. They had asked me to pay for the vacation. Not just a weekend getaway, but a full-fledged luxury resort with flights. They wanted me to pay for the entire thing. At first, I assumed they were joking. When I learned they weren't, I said no. My father's face darkened, and my mother gave me this look as if I had personally offended her. After that, things got weird. They stopped talking to me so much, and now they're kicking me out. I breathed slowly. "So this is about the vacation, huh?" My mother pursed her lips. "Jack, family supports each other." I laughed. "Yeah. And what exactly have you done to support me?" My father threw his hand down on the table. "Enough. If you're not willing to help, then you can leave. Simple as that." I shake my head. "Fine, I'll go." I gazed between them. "And I'm done paying for everything. No more groceries, no more bills, no more helping out." That made my father giggle. "Go ahead, loser. See how long you last." I gazed at my younger siblings. My sister was staring at her plate. My brother would not look at me. Nobody would stand up for me. That night, I packed my belongings. It did not take long. I hadn't really settled back in. I'd always assumed this was only temporary. I discovered a cheap place in the neighboring town. Not fantastic, but mine. Then, for a month, nothing. No calls, no texts. I assumed they had washed their hands of me, and I was comfortable with that. Until one night the phone rang. I noticed my mother's name on the screen. I nearly didn't answer it, but something told me it wasn't a random call. Something wasn't right. It had been a month since Thanksgiving and I hadn't heard anything from them. Not a single call. Not a single text. At first, I kept checking my phone, expecting my mother, or perhaps my sister, to contact me to see how I was doing. Nothing. I told myself I didn't care and was better off, but it still hurt. I had spent months assisting them, ensuring my younger siblings had what they required, and paying for items without being asked. And once I stopped, it was as if I never existed. But, after a while, I started to like the silence. My apartment was small and shabby, and I could hear my neighbors through the thin walls, but it was mine. Nobody asked me to pay for their groceries. No one expects me to pay their expenses. For the first time in months, my paycheck lasted. I could purchase something for myself without feeling guilty. Then, suddenly, my phone rang. I had just sat down with a plate of leftover takeout when I saw my mother's name flash across the screen. I simply stared at it for a second, perplexed. They hadn't called me since I left, not even to see whether I was still alive. And now, suddenly, they're reaching out. For a second, I considered ignoring it and sending it to voicemail. But something felt off. I sighed and responded. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother's voice came through, quieter than normal. Jack. We need your help. I nearly laughed. Now you need my help? What, did your vacation plans fall through? I asked, not trying to mask my sarcasm. She did not respond. Instead, she simply replied, It's Ryan. That made me sit up. What about him? She paused. I could hear muted voices in the background, my father shouting something I couldn't understand. Then she explained, he lost $25,000. I felt my stomach drop. He what? He gambled, she acknowledged. I ran my fingers across my face. Ryan was barely old enough to drink, much less gamble. But $25,000? That was more than just a few $100s in poker losses. This was serious. How the hell did he even get that kind of money? I requested an explanation. He borrowed it, she explained. Her voice crackled slightly. I closed my eyes. Jesus Christ. And now, she went on. He owes it all back. And we don't have it, Jack. We're completely out of money. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A month ago, they laughed in my face when I declared I was done paying for everything. They had kicked me out on Thanksgiving. And now they're desperate for my assistance since my foolish brother has gotten himself into a huge debt. It would have been so easy to hang up on them and tell them it wasn't my problem. Allow them to deal with it. But, despite everything, I couldn't. Ryan might have been foolish, but he was still my brother. And if he did borrow that much money, it was not from a bank. This was horrible. I breathed slowly. I'm coming over. My mother's voice was filled with relief. Thanks, Jack. I didn't respond. I simply hung up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. I had no idea what I was entering into. But I knew that this was only the beginning. The drive back to my folks' place felt odd. I hadn't been there since the night I left, and I never expected to return so soon. The neighborhood looked the same. Even in late December, a few houses still had Christmas lights up. The same old beat-up automobiles sat in the drives. Everything was exactly as I remembered it. However, it felt different. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a while, clutching the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to turn back and drive away. But I sighed, exited, and proceeded to the front door. Before I could knock, my mother opened the door. She appeared weary. Jack, she sighed. Come in. I stepped inside. The house smelled the same, like cinnamon air freshener and whatever cheap candle my mother always bought, but the energy was utterly different. Ryan was seated on the couch, stooped over and staring at the floor. My father stood at the dining room table, arms crossed, appearing angry. Nobody spoke for a second. Then I asked, all right, someone tell me what the hell happened. Ryan did not look up. My mother sat next to him and caressed his back like if he were a young child who had just skinned his knee. My father was the one who reacted. Your brother was an idiot, that's what happened. Ryan eventually spoke, and his voice was quiet. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I stared at him. How do you accidentally lose 25 grand? He let out a nervous breath. It started small. Just a couple hundred. Then I won big, so I kept going. He eventually looked up at me, his face pallid. And then I lost everything. I shake my head. Okay, but you didn't have 25 grand to lose. So who the hell gave you the money? Ryan paused. My father responded for him. He took out a loan. Something about how he said it made my stomach turn. What kind of loan? My mother spoke up calmly. Not a bank loan. I felt my jaw tightening. So, what? Some backroom loan shark? Nobody responded, but their quiet revealed everything I needed to know. Jesus Christ. I squeezed the bridge of my nose. Okay. And when exactly is he supposed to pay this back? End of the week, my father mumbled. I let out a slow breath. And you have nothing? My mother shook her head. We're already maxed out on our credit cards, we don't even have enough for next month's rent. I leaned against the wall and took everything in. A month ago, they declared me a loser and kicked me out. They were now drowning in debt, desperate, and looking to me for help. I had the money. Not all of it, but I'd been saving since I moved out. I could handle at least half of that. But, should I? They had completely abandoned me. My father had literally laughed at me as I walked out the door. But Ryan, he was different. Yes, he'd been a jerk, but I could see fear in his eyes. If he owed money to the wrong people, this was more than just a lesson to learn. It was risky. I breathed sharply. I can cover some of it. My mother gave a sigh of relief. My father said nothing. Ryan only nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. I'll wire you 12 grand, I announced. That's all I can do. My mother grabbed my hand. Thank you, Jack. I drew away. Don't. Just make sure this never happens again. I turned to Ryan. And you? You're going to pay me back, every damn cent. He gulped heavily. I will. I did not believe him. But I'd deal with it later. For the time being, I had simply bailed them out. Even though I knew I shouldn't have, I couldn't help but wonder if this would make a difference. Little did I know how incorrect I was. I wired the 12 grand that night. My mother nearly sobbed. My father whispered what I believe was a thank you, but he couldn't look me in the eye. Ryan only nodded, still looking sick to his stomach. I did not remain after that. I made it clear that this was a loan and not a gift. And Ryan would repay me. Nobody argued. As I drove back to my apartment, I reminded myself that I had done the right thing. It was not about my parents. It was about Ryan. He was my brother. And, as much as I wanted to let them all sink in the disaster they'd created, I couldn't stand by and watch Ryan get harmed over something silly. A week has gone. Then 2. Then a month. And nothing. Ryan had not sent me a dime. No calls. No texts. Nothing. I waited and gave him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps he was back on his feet. Perhaps he was working things out. Then one day I broke down and called him. He responded after a few rings. Hey, Jack. I got straight to the point. Where's my money? There was a pause. I don't have it yet. I clenched my jaw. You said you'd pay me back. I will, he replied promptly. I just need more time. I scoffed. More time? Ryan, it's been a month. You haven't even sent me $20. He became quiet. I could hear background noise, possibly from a video game. He wasn't even working, right? I felt my patience crack. You're screwing around, aren't you? No, I'm trying, man, I'm just... I cut him off. I don't care about excuses. I bailed you out. I didn't have to, but I did. And now you're just ignoring it? I'm not ignoring it, he exclaimed. Things have been hard, okay? I laughed bitterly. Yeah. Well, things are gonna get a lot tougher if you don't start paying me back. Silence. I exhaled. Whatever. Just figure it out. So I hung up. I expected something after that. 100 here, 50 there, whatever. Still, nothing. A week later, I decided to ask my parents instead. If they had the money to bail Ryan out, they could help him repay me. Right? So I called my father. As soon as he responded, I went to the point. Hey, I need to talk to you about Ryan's debt. My father gave a frustrated sigh. What about it? He hasn't paid me anything, not a dime. So? I halted. What do you mean, so? You gave him the money. That was your choice. My hold on the phone intensified. It wasn't a gift. My father gave out a dry laugh. Well, that's your problem. I believed I had misheard him. Excuse me? You chose to help him, my father said, as if explaining something to a child. That's on you. Don't come crying to us about it. I was surprised and didn't know what to say at first. Those were your exact words, I finally said. Family helps each other, you said when you kicked me out. But now that I need support, that no longer applies. Jack, you're an adult, he continued, his voice stern. Now handle your own problems. I gave a quick laugh. Wow. So, if you need money, family helps each other. But when I need, I'm on my own. That's life, he remarked dismissively. Don't you like it? Too awful. I felt sheer wrath rise up my spine. They asked me to come back. They begged me to save them. And as soon as they got their way, they abandoned me. Got it, I replied coldly. Enjoy your life, Dad. I hung up. I sat there for a minute, staring at my phone, trying to understand how deep their selfishness went. That's when I realized something. I wasn't about to let this go. Not this time. They assumed they could walk all over me. They were about to learn how mistaken they were. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone and repeating my father's words over and over. Handle your own concerns. That is life. They genuinely felt they could just use and discard me. That I would continue playing their game. Keep bailing them out while they trample all over me. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't about to let this go. I spent the following few days contemplating. If Ryan didn't pay me back, and my folks ignored it, I needed another way to receive my money. And then an idea struck me. One so basic, I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it sooner. I could still access my folks' Wi-Fi and cable accounts. I had set them up while I lived there, and the bills were always in my name because I was the one who paid for them. And guess what? They never updated the billing information after I departed. So I logged in and canceled everything. The internet is gone. Cut off the cable. Streaming services are disabled. They were officially off the grid. I sat back, waiting. Sure enough, my mother called the next morning. "Jack," she replied, agitated. "The internet's down." I pretended to be clueless. "Huh, that's odd." She sighed. "Could you look into this? Your sister has schoolwork, and we can't even watch television." I smiled. "Oh, I already know what happened." "What?" "I canceled it." Silence. "You what?" She finally spoke. "I canceled everything. Internet, cable, Netflix, and whatever else you were using is no longer available." "Jack," she gasped. "Why would you do that?" I slumped back in my chair. "I'm not sure, maybe because I'm still paying for it? But, your sister needs it for school." "Then maybe," I responded slowly, "you should pay for it yourself." I could hear my father in the background. "What is going on?" "Jack canceled everything," my mother hissed. "Good," my father said. "We don't need him." I laughed. "Yeah. Let's see how long you can do without Wi-Fi." My father grabbed the phone from my mother. "Listen, you little..." I hung up. This should have been the end of it. But I didn't know what would happen next. A few days later, when I got home from work, something seemed off. My apartment's door was unlocked. I always locked the door. Always. My stomach twisted as I gradually pushed it open. Then I saw it. My apartment had been wrecked. Cushions were thrown everywhere, my laptop was missing, my drawers were ripped open, and my television was gone. I stood there shocked. And then it struck me. This was not a random break-in. This was them. My family had broken into my house. And I'd just declared war. My heart pounded as I stood in the middle of my destroyed flat. My laptop is gone, my television is gone. Drawers were pulled open, clothes were flung everywhere. I clenched my fist. I know who did it. This was not a random break-in. This was them. I have my own family. I took a big breath and called the cops. When the officer arrived, he took one glance at the mess and inquired whether I had any suspects. I did not even hesitate. "I think my parents and my brother did it." He raised an eyebrow. "Family?" I nodded. "I used to live with them. They kicked me out, and now we're not on good terms." I detailed the entire thing: money, Wi-Fi, and debt. They most likely assumed this was vengeance. The cop took everything down. Then he posed the big question. "Would you like to press charges?" I paused. Not because I had reservations. But it was a major thing. If I filed charges, this would not be just a family drama, it'd be real. But then I thought about it. They'd broken into my house, stolen from me. After I helped them out. After I assisted them while they were deeply in debt. And the worst part? They presumably assumed I would do nothing. That I would simply accept the hit. As I always do. I met the officer's eyes. "Yes," I answered. The next day, the cops arrived at my parents' house. I was not there. But I got a call from my mother shortly after that. "Jack," she was practically screaming. "What did you do?" I slumped back in my chair. "You broke into my place. You stole my belongings. What the hell were you expecting?" "It wasn't a big deal," she responded. You just what?" I snapped. "Taught me a lesson? Did you take back what you believed you deserved? Tell me, Mom, do you even feel horrible about this?" She became silent. Then, in a low voice she added, "You didn't have to call the cops." I laughed. "Oh, so if I help you, I'm family, but when you rob me, I'm expected to let it go." "It wasn't robbery," she argued. "The cops disagree." She huffed. "Jack, we can fix this? Simply drop the charges." "No." Her breath caught. "What?" I said no. She gasped, like if I'd slapped her. Jack, this is serious? Your brother, I gave him 12 grand, I snapped. And he still hasn't paid me back. Now he's breaking into my home? I'm finished. Silence. Then she made one last move. The guilt trip. Are you really going to do this to your own family? I took a deep breath. No, Mom. You did it to yourself. So I hung up. The cops discovered my television and laptop at a local pawn shop. Sold under Ryan's name. That's all they needed. Ryan was caught for burglary, and my parents were charged as accomplices. My grandparents discovered out shortly after. And that's when things changed. Because they were infuriated. For the first time in my life, my parents were about to experience genuine consequences. I didn't attend the court proceedings. I did not have to. The proof was incontrovertible. Pawn shop records, surveillance footage, everything. Ryan pleaded guilty, perhaps believing he would get off lightly. My parents tried to justify that they had no idea what he was doing, but no one purchased it. They all received probation. No prison time. But now they had a criminal record. And it was their problem. Not me. The true repercussions occurred when my grandparents found out. I'm not sure who told them, probably one of my aunts, but when I received a phone call from my grandfather, I could tell he was furious. Jack, he asked in a raspy voice, is it true? Did your parents or Ryan steal from you? Yes, I answered. It's true. There was a prolonged pause. Then, gently, he stated, they will regret it. I'm not sure what happened after that. But my grandparents went to war. They absolutely cut off my parents. There will be no more aid with the bills. There will be no more covering up for them when they make mistakes. My father had always counted on them when things became bad. But now, he was on his own. And the icing on the cake, my grandparents repaid me every single cent that Ryan owed me. They said they did not want me to bear that load. That I'd done more than enough. And they made one thing very clear. They were not doing this for my parents. They were doing it because I was the only one in the family who had performed ethically. That was the last time I spoke to my folks. Ryan texted me a half-hearted apology a few months later, possibly because my mother compelled him to do so. But I did not answer. After all of this, I realized something. I had spent years attempting to assist people who would never aid me in return. And I was finished. Since now, I was not anyone's savior, not their safety net, not their ATM. I was going to live my life for myself. And if my folks get in trouble again, they could manage it on their own. My wife changed after a work trip, then I discovered her therapist was an old friend who convinced her to cheat and ruined our marriage. I noticed a difference in my wife, Carla, about 6 or 7 months ago. She had just returned from her company's annual trip, which was organized by her manager to assist their team reunite and build their bonds. Usually, she returned from these excursions energized, full of anecdotes about her coworkers and eager to share minor experiences that had amused or inspired her. This time, things were different. Her temperament has changed noticeably since the day she returned home. She didn't discuss much about the vacation, which surprised me. When I questioned whether anything had happened, she simply shook her head and dismissed my fears. At first, I attributed it to the usual post-trip fatigue. Maybe she was just exhausted from all the traveling, socializing, and team-building activities. But even after a few days, her behavior remained the same. In fact, things worsened. Carla became angry with me, starting disputes over little matters that would not have disturbed her in the past. Before, my wife and I rarely fought. Our relationship was always healthy. But suddenly, the accustomed calm gave way to strain. Every day, it was as if she was hunting for reasons to dispute, and these disagreements seemed to arise out of nowhere. A comment that would have made her chuckle suddenly resulted in a sigh, or, worse, a fight. I couldn't understand where this sudden fury and frustration was coming from. It was no longer just the disputes. My wife began to isolate herself in different ways. We had a weekly date ritual, which could be as simple as getting coffee or going for a lengthy walk in the park. These outings were meaningful to us because they provided us with a chance to reconnect, unwind, and focus on one another away from the distractions of work and daily life. But Carla began canceling our dates with increasingly dubious explanations. She would complain about being too tired or having too much work to catch up on, even on weekends. My concern grew as the cancellations increased. I missed spending time with my wife, our connection, and our laughter. Her mood swings become increasingly pronounced. She appeared fine one minute and then became moody and withdrawn, retreating within herself. Of course, my mind wandered. I began to worry that she was losing interest in me, or, worse, that she had fallen in love with someone else. I didn't want to think about it, but her behavior seemed so strange and out of character that I began to contemplate options I hadn't considered before. When I eventually approached Carla with my fears, she was emphatic, insisting that there was no one else but me. She even gaslighted me, claiming that I was overthinking things and that she simply needed time to straighten things out in her life. So I attempted to give Carla some space, believing that whatever she was going through would resolve itself with time. I figured if I didn't press her and just gave her space to breathe, she'd eventually come around and things would return to normal. But, sadly, it did not occur. In fact, the more room I gave her, the farther away she appeared to float. She started working longer hours and came home late, sometimes after I had gone to bed. In general, she would tell me stories about her day, hilarious anecdotes about her coworkers, or complain about the current office drama. Now there was only silence. After she returned home, she became increasingly evasive when I tried to question her, and her acts began to create concerns in my mind. With our relationship on unstable ground, I recommended to my wife that we seek marriage therapy. I hoped that with the help of a counselor, she would be able to open up to me and we could figure out what was causing our disconnect. To my astonishment, Carla declined, stating that she wanted to visit a therapist independently and that she needed to focus on herself before we could work on our relationship together. While it didn't meet my expectations, I agreed. Ultimately, I wanted her to feel supported in any manner she needed. Carla soon found a therapist and began meeting with them 3 times a week for 2-hour sessions. I didn't ask too many questions about it, assuming she'd found someone qualified to help her. All I wanted was for her to achieve the clarity and calm she was looking for, and for us to be able to reconnect. Carla appeared to be in a better mood following each session, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I hoped that this was a sign that things would get better between us, that this was the start of a new chapter in our relationship. Instead, things became stranger. Carla began spending more time away from home, frequently making plans without me. It began with a few evenings here and there, but it quickly spread to almost every weekend. She'd go without much of an explanation and not return until late at night. I don't mind if she goes out with her buddies. In fact, I've always pushed her to pursue a life outside of our marriage. But I expected her to give me a heads up. Her frequent and sudden absences, along with her failure to keep me informed, made me feel neglected in my own marriage. Meanwhile, Carla appeared unconcerned about the fact that I missed spending time with her, no clue of how much I craved our former intimacy. What troubled me even more was when I realized, almost unintentionally, that my wife wasn't only spending time with friends on her little adventures. Apparently, she was also hanging out with random strangers she met at bars. This was something she had never told me. I only discovered out after several of my friends expressed worry. They had seen her at bars, dancing with strange men, apparently intoxicated and acting in ways that were entirely out of character. They'd recognized her as my wife. It was humiliating to learn of my wife's behavior secondhand, knowing that others were watching her behaviors while I remained in the dark. I was absolutely confused, dealing with the embarrassment and uncertainty that her behavior had caused. When I finally built up the courage to bring it up, hoping for an open discussion about what was going on, she rejected my concerns. She waved them off, explaining that she was just having fun and that dancing and talking to strangers did not imply that she was doing anything inappropriate with them. She said it as if her activities in meeting these strangers were insignificant, as if I shouldn't be touched by this version of herself that I scarcely recognized. Then she stopped assisting around the house. Since we both started working, we've always divided household tasks evenly. I've always cooked and packed our lunches every day. Carla handled the dishes, loading and unloading the dishwasher, and was in charge of the washing, while I did all of the folding and grass mowing. This system of shared responsibility has always been effective for us. But Carla abruptly ceased holding up her half of the bargain. She began to moan about how she felt oppressed by having to perform housekeeping, claiming that none of her friends appeared to have to work both at their jobs and from home. We had always had a mutual understanding, an equal give and take that allowed us both to concentrate on our careers while keeping our home in order. Her sudden irritability seemed utterly out of character. When she voiced these objections, I attempted to comprehend her point of view, but I couldn't ignore the facts. I pointed out that if she was referring to her neighborhood acquaintances, most of them were stay-at-home spouses who spent their entire day running their homes. I said that if she was feeling burdened by both work and housework, we should consider her leaving her job to run the household full-time, and I would gladly take on the position of sole earner. However, if she did not want to leave her job, she needed to understand that we both had to share home responsibilities. After all, I had never complained about the housework I did, so why was she bringing it up? Carla insisted that she no longer wanted to do housekeeping, claiming that her obligations at work were already too taxing, and she didn't want to come home and work on top of that. She told me I needed to step up and take care of things around the house, at least until she felt more prepared. Since then, I've been performing all of the household responsibilities by myself, with no assistance. I take care of the cooking, cleaning, and laundry to ensure that everything works properly. I hoped that she would finally recognize and appreciate my efforts. But, sadly, my work has gone unnoticed. So, after all of my efforts, imagine my surprise when I realized that 2 months ago, my wife was going around the neighborhood spreading false allegations about me. I learned from some of my male neighbors, whose wives are acquainted with Carla. These friends, who have known me for a long time, sounded concerned about what my wife had said. Carla had apparently been characterizing me as a domineering or poisonous husband, stating that I never allowed her to live calmly. When some of these wives inquired as to what I was doing to make her feel this way, Carla claimed that over time, she had realized that I was too closed-minded and had prevented her from having any enjoyment. As a result, she began to feel unfulfilled in our marriage. This, she claimed, was why she began engaging with other men. To help her reconnect with pieces of herself that she felt had become too suppressed since marrying me. She also told her friends that she had begun fantasizing about exploring her femininity with other men. At first, I clearly did not trust them. This did not sound like Carla at all. Carla, I knew, was always discreet about our relationship and avoided discussing personal topics, particularly with our friends. Also, why would she lie about me like this? I'd never stopped her from doing anything. For months, she had been doing anything she wanted as I stood silently by. She suddenly blamed me for being toxic and repressing her. I chose to face her directly, telling her what my friends had revealed to me. I asked her whether it was true that she had been talking about me this way. I wanted to hear her side of the story and understand why she felt compelled to share those details with others. To my surprise, Carla did not dispute any of it. She quietly revealed that she had communicated her sentiments with those people, explaining that she was dissatisfied and unsure about our relationship, so she vented her anger to others. I asked her what she meant exactly. Carla began to open up about her therapy sessions, revealing how her therapist had helped her recognize what she lacked in her life. Enthusiasm. She informed me, in an unnaturally detached tone, that she now found me uninteresting and predictable, and that our marriage lacked passion. These words stung, especially since I had always imagined she was happy with the life we had created together. I reminded her of all the times she had expressed happiness, and how we had worked together to maintain our relationship balanced and fulfilling over the years. Instead of understanding where I was coming from, she accused me of stifling her by clinging to old memories and situations that she believed were obsolete. She argued that, while she had grown and kept up with the changes, I had remained the same, which was why we were so disconnected. My thoughts began to spin, so I asked her bluntly, "What do you want from our marriage?" She hesitated, evidently nervous, before adding that she and her therapist believed that an open marriage could help us restore our marriage. I was taken aback. I told her up front that I did not believe in open weddings. Carla then claimed that even if I didn't believe in them, she did. She stated that talking up about our relationship would restore the excitement she felt was missing, allowing her to rediscover herself while remaining married to me. She also emphasized that, in an open marriage, if I wasn't comfortable sleeping with strangers, that was fine, but she wanted the opportunity to do so without guilt. Her suggestion sent me reeling. I could scarcely understand what she was saying. I never expected that our marriage would reach a stage where she would seek satisfaction elsewhere. How could meeting new people while still married improve our relationship? How could her therapist propose something like this? I assumed my wife was seeing a therapist to improve herself, but in actuality, this so-called therapist was merely encouraging her to explore these crazy beliefs. I informed Carla that if she wanted a divorce, she didn't have to lie about being excited or needing anything new in her life. I argued that if she was so dissatisfied with me, she should just be honest instead of making up excuses to justify an open marriage. I told her that it was better for us to part ways than to stay married while meeting up with strangers. This was not how I imagined a marriage to be, and I couldn't stand by it. But, to my astonishment, Carla fought back, insisting she enjoyed being married to me. She highlighted how much she respected me as a dependable and trustworthy partner, and how I offered a stable basis that she valued. Yet, in the same breath, she said the spark between us had vanished. She insisted that we stay married and simply have fun with other people. She suggested that this new venture could help us and keep our marriage interesting. I informed my wife that I needed time to think about it because this was not a decision I could take lightly. But as I spent the following few days pondering on our relationship, I realized that an open marriage was not for me. And more crucially, neither was the person Carla had become. She had changed so much over time that I could no longer recognize her or feel close to her. She dressed differently. Her outfits had suddenly become more exposing and provocative. She was always hooked to her phone and engaged in chats with others. It was as if she had adopted a whole different lifestyle, one that no longer allowed for the principles we formerly shared. She seldom spoke to me anymore and had completely disregarded her job in maintaining our home. She treated me as a roommate at best, not a partner. I slowly realized that I did not want this version of my wife. I didn't want a companion who needed to see other people to feel satisfied. I had spent months trying to be patient, supportive, and give her the space she required, but the Carla I had fallen in love with had vanished, replaced by someone who appeared to consider our relationship as a convenience rather than a commitment. And it stung. But I understood it might be time to let go of our marriage. I had done everything I could, but it was clearly insufficient. After 2 weeks of careful consideration, I got down with Carla and informed her that I wanted a divorce. I explained all of the reasons I had given above and persuaded her not to challenge my decision. Carla, on the other hand, became enraged almost immediately. She accused me of being overly sensitive and felt that requesting a divorce was an unreasonable response. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't just give in and embrace the new lifestyle she was offering. I remained calm, emphasizing that this was not what I wanted and that she couldn't compel me to accept it. Each point I made seemed to make her angrier. Carla suddenly turned on me, accusing me of refusing to work on our marriage, alleging that I was the root of the problem. I wasn't surprised by her decision. She had always enjoyed gaslighting me and blaming me for everything without taking any responsibility herself. I tried to reason with her, but she refused to give in. Realizing we were going nowhere, I asked her to go. Since this was my house, I felt right in telling her to gather her belongings and go now that we were finished. Carla raged at me, saying I had no right to ask her to leave, and even threatened to ruin my life if I followed through with the divorce. Her wrath simply confirmed my choice, so I held firm, quietly advising her not to escalate the issue any further. In the end, she had no choice but to comply, but only after throwing a tantrum. She threw stuff around the home and even scratched my car in a fit of wrath before departing. Fortunately, I documented everything, photographic evidence of the damage and recordings of her outbursts, knowing that I would probably need it later on. This was simply a sad, terrible end to what had once been a really important relationship. Carla has been texting me insults about my manhood and spreading tales around town, accusing me of unfairly kicking her out and calling me a coward for failing to fight for our marriage. Update 1. Thank you everyone for your warm words. I'm not a fool. I now recognize that my wife may have had an affair, or several affairs, outside of our marriage. This is probably why she had the nerve to propose an open marriage to me. Clearly, she only wanted the benefits of being married to someone as established as me while putting no effort into our relationship. Why did this happen? I have no idea. Perhaps she never truly loved me, or she fell out of love over time. It doesn't really matter anymore. Carla continues to leave voicemails blaming me for everything. I'm tired of her continual allegations. Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since my last update. Carla had been wanting to meet for the past week, messaging and calling regularly, so I finally agreed to meet with her today. Part of me hoped she'd come around, that she'd be willing to discuss openly and even accept responsibility for everything that had happened between us. But as soon as we sat down, Carla went into a new story. She indicated that her therapist thought I was departing our marriage just because things had become difficult. According to this so-called therapist, I was the one who failed to fulfill my promise by refusing to adhere to Carla's requests. Then, as if that wasn't enough, Carla said she was willing to accept me back if I agreed to certain terms. I was taken aback. Take me back? Remember when I asked her for a divorce? To entertain myself, I inquired about her condition. Carla requested that I commit to an open marriage and allow her to leave her job so she could enjoy a stress-free life without having to worry about work. Hearing this made me laugh out loud. Initially, I assumed she was joking. How could she possibly be doubling down on such ridiculous expectations after everything that had occurred? Did she really expect me to be open to any of this after how she had treated me? Her total lack of self-awareness was astonishing. I told her right away that I would never agree to such foolish demands, because I was done with our marriage. I then stated that I had previously consulted with a lawyer and was in the process of filing for divorce. Her face became white with horror. Her tone changed immediately, from angry to imploring. She inquired whether I was really leaving her. I nodded. There was nothing left for me in our marriage. I was ultimately tired of trying to make things work with someone who seemed removed from reality and unwilling to compromise. Then Carla burst into tears. I was surprised to see her cry. This was the last thing I had expected. I gently urged her to calm down and explain why she was reacting in this way. Was she truly saddened over my decision? She should have anticipated this all along, right? Watching her cry made me question whether there was something more going on. I begged her to be honest with me. Was there something more behind her unusual conduct during the last few months? Carla finally opened up and revealed the truth. She added that approximately a year ago, she reconnected with an old high school acquaintance named Elle during their reunion. Elle was a self-proclaimed relationship expert on social media. Carla stated that she and Elle began spending more and more time together, rekindling their connection through long conversations and regular meetups. She acknowledged that Elle had begun to exert a big effect in her life. Over time, Carla disclosed that it was Elle who first noticed that she was unhappy in our marriage and began probing her about me and our relationship. Carla admitted that as she told Elle more about me and our life together, he frequently criticized our marriage, portraying it as oppressive and limiting. Elle continually reminded Carla of how exciting and adventurous she was in high school, when she had numerous boyfriends, and how she had always expected Carla to be the same way. Elle, on the other hand, thought Carla had gotten uninteresting. This caused Carla to resent me. She essentially blamed me for her change in conduct. She felt as if she had lost herself in the marriage, and rather than accepting responsibility for her own actions, she transferred her dissatisfaction onto me. Over time, her animosity grew, and she began to emotionally remove herself, certain that I was the reason she wasn't living the life she desired for herself. Elle gradually convinced Carla that the only way she could return to her old self was to let go of her inhibitions, be more open around others, and simply have fun. When Carla's business trip came around 7 months ago, Elle encouraged her to take advantage of the opportunity to let loose and flirt with her male coworkers, especially because she would be away from home and me. Carla then admitted to having made out with someone during her work trip but refused to tell me his name. She informed me that after returning from the vacation, she felt terrible shame but was too afraid to admit it. However, Elle was overjoyed for her and encouraged her to branch out beyond our marriage. Carla stated that going out to clubs and getting attention from men made her feel recognized and validated. It excited her, and she began to pursue that high. She knew she was doing something bad all along, but she couldn't stop herself. So, when I finally suggested counseling, she was worried she'd give in and tell me the truth, forcing me to leave her. Instead, she sought therapy as a cover-up. These so-called treatment sessions were not actually therapy at all. They were just meetings with Elle to gossip and vent. Carla said that she trusted Elle fully because they had known each other for years and she believed Elle knew her better than anyone else. Elle's influence grew so strong that Carla began to internalize what her friend told her, that she deserved freedom and excitement, regardless of the consequences. When I approached her and explained my worries, Elle would convince Carla that I was controlling or toxic, that I was preventing her from expressing her true self. In fact, it was because of Elle that Carla had begged for an open marriage, expecting me to give in. But, to her amazement, I hadn't. Rather, I had kicked her out. Inside, Carla informed me that she had wanted to tell me the truth after that, but Elle had persuaded her to keep control of the situation, to keep me on edge and force me to chase her instead. Elle had forcefully persuaded Carla not to apologize at this lunch, suggesting that she should demand what she wanted from me. However, Elle's advice backfired, and instead of breaking, I appeared more determined than ever to pursue a divorce. That's why Carla eventually revealed the truth. Carla urged me to not leave her. She admitted that she had most likely lost her mind temporarily, that Elle's influence had muddled her judgment. She said that because her buddy was a relationship expert, she believed her counsel. However, it was now evident that none of it had helped, it had just exacerbated the situation. Carla stated that now that she had finally come clean, she was ready to pursue legitimate therapy and, if I was willing, attend marriage counseling together. I could tell Carla was eager for one last shot to recreate what we had, promising to do everything it needed to make up. However, I was unwilling to give her another chance. Clearly, Elle had influenced my wife's decision, but she wasn't the only issue here. Carla had also been involved in all of this. She had made her own decisions, deliberately and knowingly. For months, she could have mended our connection by having an honest discussion about her feelings as an adult. Instead, she chose to keep everything bottled up and succumb to Elle's destructive advice. She had gaslighted me, twisted me, and rejected my emotions, all while claiming everything was fine. Also, she had cheated on me. And now, when it was too late, she had only spoken the truth out of desperation. My husband's ex and male tried to humiliate me for years until their almost anniversary stunt backfired and he finally cut them off for good. For reference, I, 28F, and my husband Shaw, 28M, have been married for 2 years. Shah and I dated for 2 years before, but we'd known each other since high school. We didn't start dating for a few years after graduation. I met him at a restaurant unexpectedly, exchanged numbers, went on a few dates, and that's how we ended ourselves here, nearly 4 years later. Shah was dating Diane, another high school girl, before I met her. She was a grade below us and had known Shah since middle school. He and I were not really close, but we had a lot of shared acquaintances back in school, so I saw a lot of him and Diane together. After we graduated from high school, I lost touch with him because he moved to college in a distant state and we didn't see much of one another. When we finally met at the restaurant some years later, I asked him about Diane. He told me that they had split up a year and a half ago. She was the one who dumped him because she wanted different things in life and needed a break to travel the world. But she promised to come back to him someday. Which simply meant she wanted to be alone for a time, date other men without guilt, and retain Shah as a backup plan. So, following the breakup, he remained friends with her but reduced contact. By the time we met, he'd nearly completely moved on from Diane. I had also begun to see him in a new light. He had matured much since our previous meeting in high school. Shah and I reconnected 4 years ago and soon became friends. We still have the same laid-back relationship. He claims that is something he never had with Diane. She was continually trying to get him to chase after her because she thought it made her more beautiful. She flirted with other guys, went out with her friends without speaking to him for days, and never asked Shah how he felt about anything. He stayed with her because he was young and stupid, and he felt obligated to make the relationship work because they had been together for so long. Another factor was that his mother, Sharon, 49F, was a major fan of Diane. Diane had met my mother-in-law numerous times while they were together. Sharon praised Diane and pretended to be someone else whenever Diane visited. According to Shah, Diane did the same thing for Sharon, showering her with accolades and acting like a completely different person to impress her. They would chat about other people, particularly Shah's female acquaintances, whom he despised, and sometimes even about him. Shah's aunts and cousins. Diane is also conventionally attractive, which makes Sharon appreciate her even more. I'm not sure why that exists, but it does. Shah told me that Sharon continued to invite Diane to family occasions and holiday dinners after their breakup. He tried talking to his mother about it, urging her not to invite Diane, but Sharon refused. She stated that she really liked her and that even though they had split up, she and Diane remained friends, so she saw nothing wrong with inviting her around. They spoke almost every other week and were really good friends. So this persisted even after I began dating Shah and he introduced me to his family. I felt strange about it at first, and still do. But there was a reason I had tolerated it for so long. Shah initially brought me home to meet his family for Christmas 4 years ago. We had been dating for about 8 months. Diane was also present, and she treated me horribly the entire time. She noticed my appearance, height, clothes, makeup, you name it. She was skilled enough to make everything sound funny, as if she was joking, but Shah knew exactly what she was doing and stood up for me. Sharon, on the other hand, quickly shut it down and asked me if I had a problem with Diane's jokes, putting me in the position. I knew that if I indicated I wasn't good with it, they'd make it appear as if I was insecure or jealous, putting me down even further. So I resolved to present a strong front and say, I don't care. It was petty of me, but the moment I said it, I saw their expressions. They seemed surprised and annoyed. That's when I realized I'd done the correct thing. When Shah and I came home, he apologized to me for Sharon and Diane's behavior. He promised me he'd make sure his mother stopped inviting Diane to family functions. But I was the one who warned him not to do that. I knew the type of woman they were, and I didn't want to lose to them, if you get my drift. I didn't want them to believe they were intimidating me or making me feel insecure. Because they had not. And I felt compelled to prove it. I explained this to Shah, and although he was astonished by my approach, he stopped interfering after that day. Since then, Diane has attended every single family function Sharon has thrown. Every time they act the same way with me. Snide remarks. Backhanded compliments. Constant attempts to bring up Diane's past with Shah, even when it is entirely unrelated, in order to make things difficult for me. I've confronted everything with a brave face, and I try to remain as unmoved as possible. Sharon has even stated multiple times that Diane was her ideal daughter-in-law and would have made a better bride for Shah. Indirectly, of course. It was bothersome, but I tried to seem unconcerned. Because as long as Shah was by my side, I didn't mind what others said. Sharon and Diane could talk for hours on end, and it wouldn't matter to me. That's how I've handled things for the past 4 years. And I intended to maintain the same mindset for the next 4. I was not going to be the first one to snap, that was for sure. Now let's get into what actually happened, The incident that brought me here. Sharon became 49 years old 3 days ago. Every year, she throws a big celebration for her family and friends. This year, Shah did not want to attend. Instead, he wanted to attend his co-worker's engagement celebration, which happened to fall on the same day. And he had good reasons. His co-worker was only getting engaged once, and they were really close. However, Sharon refused to accept it. She made him pledge to attend her birthday party instead. And after days of pressure, she wore him out. So we decided to go. Diane was invited to the function, just like any other. And she dressed to the nines. For some reason, Sharon was also overdressed. But it was her birthday, so I let that one go. Shah and I had agreed to leave after Sharon cut the cake and attend the engagement celebration. At around 5:30 p.m., my father-in-law brought out the cakes, and to our astonishment, there were two. One of them stated, "Happy almost anniversary." Shah and I were puzzled. We had no idea what the other cake meant, and neither did anyone else. We waited for the birthday girl to explain. Instead, Diane took over. To our surprise, she took Shah's arm and dragged him to stand close to her. We were too surprised to respond because he had suddenly been forced into the spotlight, and everyone was staring at him. Then Diane began chatting. She began by telling that almost 10 years ago, on Sharon's birthday, Shah had gotten down on one knee and handed her a promise ring. They were both 18 years old at the time, set to go to various colleges. 10 years later, she still wore the same ring. To prove that, she proudly raised her hand in front of everyone. Then she wrapped Shah in an awkward hug, which he did not respond to. Sharon encouraged them, smiling as she explained that she was ready to let them steal her thunder this time so they could enjoy what may have been. The whole situation was so absurd that Shah and I stood there with our mouths agape, just like the rest of the guests. For several minutes, no one spoke. Because what could you possibly say in response to something this insane? But Diane kept going. She joked about Shah being her almost husband, and Sharon being her almost mother-in-law, thus today was their almost anniversary. As if we didn't get the joke. Then Sharon sliced the so-called anniversary cake. She started by feeding Diane a slice. Then she tried feeding it to Shah. That's when Shah appeared to snap back to reality. He backed away from his mother when she brought the cake close to his mouth. Sharon was astonished and questioned him, "What's wrong?" That's when all hell broke loose. Shah exploded. He began shouting at Sharon and Diane, calling them out for what they had just done. Years of pent-up rage eventually spilled out, right there, in the thick of the celebration. He ripped into them, calling them shallow, ignorant, and so self-centered that they had become entirely insane. He admitted that he felt humiliated to have ever been engaged with Diane. He was even more mortified that he was biologically connected to Sharon. Because they were the trashiest women he'd ever met. I have to admit that his reaction surprised me. Shah is normally a pretty calm guy. He rarely yells or gets furious with others. It takes a lot to drive him to the brink. But Sharon and Diane had finally finished it. With each other's assistance, of course. After shouting at them, Shah stormed out of the party, followed by me. Instead, we took a taxi directly to his co-worker's place. I tried to talk to him in the cab, but he was clearly agitated. He said he didn't want to talk about his mother or his ex at that time. So I dropped it. When we arrived at the engagement party, his attitude gradually improved as he greeted his friends and co-workers. I was happy to see he was doing well. When we returned home, Shah was in a much better mood. So I decided to bring up what happened at Sharon's party again, hoping that he would want to talk about it now. But he didn't. Instead, I received an earful about how some of this was also my fault. When I recalled the event, he admitted that Sharon and Diane had attempted to embarrass me with that ludicrous cake. But I wasn't completely innocent. He reminded me that for years, I had forced him to remain silent and let Sharon and Diane do whatever they wanted. Because I felt I needed to demonstrate that I didn't care. I had made it all about myself. My urge to show others how unconcerned I was. But in doing so, I entirely forgot that Shah was equally implicated in this mess as I was. And it was getting on his nerves. While Sharon, Diane, and I were competing in mind games, Shah was hurting. Nobody bothered to check on him or ask how he felt about anything. He did not anticipate his mother or ex to show him any consideration. But he expected it of me. And in that moment, he told me something that struck me hard. I'd let him down by prioritizing my own feelings over his in the scenario. That night, I protested with him, telling him that he was being far too harsh and cruel to me. But now that I've had time to think about it, I believe he was correct. I had pushed my husband to remain silent for years while his mother welcomed his ex to family gatherings only to bring me down. Okay, I apologized to Shah this evening. I read the comments, did some reflection, and even discussed it with a few of my friends. I concluded that I was in the wrong here, and that what he said that day was accurate. I had been putting my feelings before of his, and I was so busy behaving as if Diane and Sharon's behavior didn't disturb me that I didn't even consider the possibility that it did bother Shah. For his sake, I should have allowed him terminate this if he wanted to. I forced him to ignore his own feelings for years so that I could win a sick mind game with individuals I didn't even like. And in doing so, I risked the one connection that was most important to me. I had made a serious mistake and realized I needed to make amends. Shah had been giving me the cold shoulder since the party, and I had tried to pretend it didn't bother me. It's something I've always done, and it's been a problem for a long time. My natural reaction is to pretend that things don't upset me, even when they do. I want to be viewed as unconcerned and unaffected by anything, so I act like it and suppress my emotions. I now recognize that this is a really harmful coping method. I absolutely need to work on this if I want my marriage to work. I skipped work today and decided to get him dinner at his favorite restaurant, as well as a chocolate cake with the words, "I'm sorry," written on it. I returned home, set everything up, and tried to make it as romantic as possible, because I know he likes sappy rom-com style apologies. Also, I was really sorry for what I had put him through, even if it was inadvertent. He arrived home from work in the evening and was surprised to see what I had planned for him. He forgave me within 15 minutes of his arrival. We had a tearful reconciliation, and I ended up crying because I was afraid I'd lose him over it. When he wasn't speaking to me, I felt completely adrift. We spoke it out, and everything is well between us now. Since I admitted my mistake, I revealed to him my constant desire to be viewed as calm and laid back, someone nonchalant for no other reason than it seems cool, and because I don't want to be vulnerable in front of others. That is the underlying explanation for this entire catastrophe. He recognized and respected the fact that I admitted it and stated that I needed to work on it rather than shoving it down and suppressing my emotions. He also apologized for being nasty to me, which I don't believe he needed to do. He did it because he is a good man and loves me, which makes me feel like I have won in life. After supper, we finally discussed what had transpired to Diane and Sharon. I hadn't heard from either of them since the party, and my battle with Shah had pushed the whole issue out of my mind. Sharon, on the other hand, had been continually texting Shah, attempting to persuade him to apologize to Diane, who was supposedly distraught and stricken with grief as a result of Shah's treatment of her. I had to work pretty hard not to roll my eyes when I read the messages Sharon sent. She was clearly attempting to guilt-trip him into apologizing to the woman. Sharon pretended that the cake and the entire almost anniversary farce were nothing more than a joke. There was nothing deeper behind it. But I called BS on it. This was a married man they were pulling this scam on. Surely, they had the intelligence to recognize how improper and insulting this was towards me. They did it on purpose, since they wanted to humiliate me during the party. So they couldn't simply dismiss it by saying, "It was just a joke," and pretend Shah had overreacted. The hubris of them to claim that Shah and I had gone too far or disrespected them by leaving the party was ridiculous. Shah had previously been ignoring her communications, but when I got those messages today, we finally agreed to stop communicating with her. We'd had enough of her crap. And we didn't want any part of it anymore. 3 days ago, Shah and I blocked Sharon from all of our social media accounts. Shah also told his father that he didn't want to speak with his mother anymore. His father appreciated his decision, because he knew Shah's emotions. But he also refused to interfere. He loves his wife and knows he can't leave her, so he's remaining completely out of it, as he has for the past 5 years. I don't agree with my father-in-law's attitude, but I can't do anything about it. Everything had been running perfectly for the preceding 2 days. But then, today, Shah contacted me out of the blue and said he needed to run to the hospital. Apparently, his mother had fallen from the top of the steps and fractured her leg. Shah's maternal uncle had informed him, and he fled immediately upon hearing the news. We both arrived at the hospital at roughly the same time. But before we could enter, Sharon stopped us in our tracks, and she was perfectly well. She and Diane had surprised us in the hospital's parking lot. Then they nonchalantly informed us that this was the only way to grab Shah's attention, because he had blocked them everywhere. They didn't expect me to show up with him. Instead of acknowledging me, they ignored me and began talking to Shah as if they had done nothing wrong. Diane attempted to explain that everything she did at the party was a prank and that she never meant to insult him. Sharon backed her up. Shah allowed them to converse for a bit. And then, much to their surprise, he told his mother and ex to F off. Then he went away with me once more. Sharon started shouting at us as we got into our different cars. But we didn't stay around to hear what she had to say. I'm sure she was cursing at us, but it didn't matter. She lied to get to meet Shah again. And I couldn't think of anything more manipulative than that. Shah returned home because he was too stressed. I, on the other hand, needed to return to work. While at work, I received a call from an unknown number. It turned out to be Sharon. She screamed at me for 15 seconds before I finally disconnected the call. I'd merely been taken off guard while working. Else, I wouldn't have responded. All I heard were hand-picked swear words spoken at maximum volume. I had no idea why she was furious at me. I had nothing to do with Shah's behavior. She had pushed her own son to that point, not me. Anyway, I blocked her and attempted to go on with my day. When I came back home at 6 p.m., I finally got to speak with Shah. He told me that he had also blocked the rest of his mother's relatives, including his uncle, because it was obvious that they would go to any length to persuade him to forgive Sharon and speak with her. That's all we can do right now since they're not threatening us in any manner, and they're not stalking us on a regular basis, so a restraining order is not an option. Shah also told his father about what happened today, but he still refuses to intervene. It's his choice, and Shah adores his father, so I won't say anything right now. But, personally, I don't think my father-in-law's behavior is a wonderful example of being a good father. The least he could do was speak to his wife and advocate for his son. But he won't even do it. Shah adores his father, but the man has never stood up for him when it comes to Sharon. I've only kept my mouth shut out of respect for their relationship. Otherwise, I'd have a lot to say about how incredibly selfish his entire family is. They never think about anyone other than themselves. I will never understand how a man like Shah could come from such a family. Hello everyone, it's been a week since I last updated. Yesterday, Shah and I decided to file a restraining order against Sharon and Diane because of something they did to me. Or, more precisely, attempted to do. 3 days ago, on Thursday, I was returning from work. On Thursdays, I normally go to a coffee shop near my office and purchase myself a frappuccino as a treat. Last Thursday, I was planning to do the same. But as soon as I walked into the shop, Diane and Sharon rose from their chairs, where they had been waiting for me, and rushed straight at me with their coffees. Before I could even respond, they both flung their drinks in my face. Then Diane took some whipped cream from her cup and put it into my hair. I was stunned. I just froze on the spot as everyone laughed. The baristas ran over to assist me clean up. They did their best to remove the muck off of me, so a big thanks to them for basically quitting their work to assist me. Even the other customers were patient and kind. When I finally got the most of it off, my clothing were sticky and unpleasant, and my hair was horrible, but at least I was cleaner. Some of the other patrons inquired about me, and one even asked if I wanted to contact the cops. So I did. I reported Diane and Sharon and filed charges against them. However, they just received a fine, a slap on the wrist, because this was a misdemeanor and they had not physically hurt me. Unless you consider my clothes, which I can't wear to work again due to fading brown coffee stains on the front. Nonetheless, we filed charges, and the incident is now on their record, which will strengthen our case. Shah wanted to make this public, so he posted about it on social media so that more people would be aware and avoid Diane and his mother. But he changed his mind when he saw I just wanted to move on from this without any further complications. Honestly, that encounter shook me more than I expected. It may seem ridiculous, but it actually made me think. If things had escalated, it might have been far worse than them throwing coffee in my face. They could have really injured me if they wanted to. They were familiar with my routine thanks to my social media presence. They had my address. This could have gone extremely wrong. Shah and I had been considering moving since we had a good financial year. But with what occurred, we will definitely be going. We had also been thinking about having children and we're going to start trying soon. But my in-laws will never meet my children. We've also formally cut off my father-in-law, who refused to intervene even after the coffee incident. Shah got into a heated argument with him and eventually cut him off. And honestly, I am relieved. I'll never have to see or hear from these folks again.